The story begins as a young voice calls out to his older brother, asking the former what type of flower the one he's pointing at is called. An older boy with dirty blonde hair leans next to him, saying it's an echinarep, while also explaining that this flower is used as a decorative plant, but it can also be eaten and is used in herbal drinks too. The younger boys are excited and impressed that their older brother knows everything, so they proceed to ask another. Before he could answer, this older boy spotted another dark-haired boy, Terry, and called him over. The eldest pulls Terry, along with the twins, as we begin the story of our protagonist and his adorable little brothers. Let's start from the beginning. Our protagonist is just your average Joe in his 30s, born and raised in Japan. At least that's who he was until for some unknown reason he found himself reborn into nobility as a child. That night he hears bells ringing in the distance. He overhears his guardians referring to it as bells of blessings, with his other guardian feeling forlorn that he, Lord Asha, can't even take a step near the chapel. The woman, Lady Hardy, pities Asha for how cruelly he's being treated by His Majesty. The other party, Lord Werrell, asks her not to say anything more. While the two are torn by the current happening, here's our protagonist, mindlessly looking out the window as he has come to realize that he's in a different world now. He hears more murmuring from behind, with Lord Werrell reminding the lady that the child is still the Emperor's son, so they need to mind their manners. Actually, Asha can hear them just fine and wonders if he should just pretend he can't hear them. But more important than that, this place is definitely not Japan, given how it's pretty pale for a Japanese summer. From the looks of it, it's not even the same world he used to live in. Why? Just look at Lord Werrell, he has animal ears and a tail. Asha, finally curious as to what's happening, calls out to them and asks what the bells are celebrating. The two became frantic and looked away, not knowing what to say to His Highness. That is, until a giant talking bear waltzes in, reprimanding the two for looking so down. According to this beastkin, whose name is Lord Helkoff, Lord Werrell and Lady Hardy are only making things harder for His Highness. They were joined by another named Lord Ikto, with the latter leaning close to Asha as he explained that the bells are ringing to bless the baptism of His Highness's baby brother. Asha is taken aback by this Lord Ikto because look at that, he has blue skin. That's definitely not normal in Japan. Wait, what? His brother? Asha suddenly becomes a bundle of cuteness, eyes shining upon knowing that he has a baby brother now. Lady Hardy is still hesitant and worried before asking Asha if he's happy that his baby brother has just been born. The young master beams again, smiling as he says he's happy, of course. He asks Lady Hardy when he can meet his little brother, and when the latter hesitates again, it makes Asha ask if there is something wrong with the queen. Lady Hardy quickly tells him that the queen is fine, so it gets Asha thinking. You know, baptisms are usually held a few days after birth, since that's the time when the baby finally receives their baptismal name. Asha's sure that his baby brother is fine, and yet right now, during the latter's baptism, Asha is out here. Bearing these facts in mind, he wonders if he's the result of an affair. He decides to ask them directly, isn't his father the Emperor? If so, then shouldn't that make him a prince? Lady Hardy and Lord Werrell don't know what to say. Ultimately, it was Lord Werrell who attended to his questions. The prince's aide doesn't know the extent of Asha's understanding, but Lord Werrell firmly tells him that he was born because he was wanted. Ikto kneels right next to him, telling Asha that he is the Emperor's firstborn son, the royal heir. However, because Asha is not the queen's child, the succession will pass to his younger brother. Asha couldn't be bothered by any of that. In his mind, being called a prince is already too much for someone like him who used to be a commoner. But if his little brother has the perfect noble bloodline, then he'll make sure to give the latter his full support. Asha beams at Ikto, thanking him for explaining things. Meanwhile, Ikto and the others can only stare back at the young lord, worry etched on their faces. Cut to a year later, we finally see the Emperor make his debut in the story. The young Emperor happily calls out to Asha, asking if his son has been well. And we have Asha, now age 4, whose full name is Asgyros Frisosario Movino Iscarion from the House of Nistaf, who lets himself be carried by his father. The Emperor carries him in his arms, noting how the child has gotten heavier and probably taller too. Then there's Asha, who greets his own father a little too formally for a 4-year-old. So much so that the Emperor questions if he really is a child. Spoiler alert, he's 30 years old, at least mentally speaking. Anyway, as his title suggests, the Emperor rules everything in this empire, which is made up of multiple countries. This includes the beast folk like Helkoff, the sea folk Ikto, and then there's the half-half Werrell. You see, Werrell is half beastkin and half elf. Asha and Lady Hardy, on the other hand, belong to the human race. Now, it's been a year since our protagonist transmigrated into this world, and you could say he managed to learn a lot during his stay. Unfortunately for him, Asha still hasn't met his baby brother, and it seems like he's deliberately being kept apart from the younger prince. Then there's his father, the Emperor, the root of it all. The whole complicated scenario started with the last Emperor, Asha's grandfather. You see, Asha's father was the illegitimate child of the previous Emperor and was raised as a count's son. Anyway, the current emperor is still doting over Asha when his aide reprimands him for acting inappropriately, saying His Majesty is damaging his dignity. Of course, Asha's father reasons that he hasn't seen his son for so long, so he just knows he made the child lonely. With that said, he asks his aide to just let him be for a while. It's not like he's bothering anyone after all. Continuing with how Asha's father became the emperor, well, most of the princes died off, leaving his father directly in line, and before they knew it, he was suddenly crowned as prince. As a result, Asha's father rushed through education and had to learn everything before he was married off to a duke's daughter. The emperor not only feels bad for his son, but he also feels bad for Hardy, asking if the lady needs anything. Hardy says she never faced such things. Besides, Asha is her nephew after all. But there is one thing. Asha's shoes don't fit him anymore. When he heard that, His Majesty couldn't help but comment on how kids grow up pretty fast. He turns to his aide, Labsua, ordering the latter to give Hardy money from his personal funds, which Labsua reluctantly does. So, here's the layout of the whole manor. The emperor lives in the west wing where the past princes used to live, but it's in a different wing than where the royal family stays. Asha, on the other hand, is staying at the farthest wing from the main hall in a sad little corner. It's as if he's intentionally cut off from everything and everyone, no? Hardy shares that Asha's been doing well in his studies lately, and that he's pretty great with geography and history. The emperor is impressed because when he was Asha's age, he barely studied at all. Asha finally speaks up and calls out to his father. He looks down, a little troubled, then finally tells the older man that he wants to read more books. His Majesty is impressed by how his child is such a diligent learner. The emperor asks Hardy if the West Wing has a library, and she answers that it has, but the place doesn't have any books. Since stocking it up would take time, the emperor permits them to use his library, even though it's considered a bit improper. As if to confirm his statement, the emperor turns to Lapsua, asking what library his son can use. The aide answers that the most appropriate one would be the imperial library. With this, Asha can read more books now, and he couldn't be more thankful to his father. Seeing his cute little reaction made the emperor dote on Asha even more. It's great that his son loves books, taking after his mother. Little did he know the 30-year-old man inside of Asha just wants to learn more about the world, if he's being honest, since he's already at it. Asha tells his father that he also wants to try sword training sometime. Upon hearing that, the older man shares that Helkov was pretty strong back in the day, but he himself had also gone through tough times in the army. The emperor warns him that he may get hurt, and in the same breath assures Asha that if he learns properly, then it won't be so serious when that happens. He just needs to follow Helkov's instructions carefully, patting Asha's head as he says so. Their precious time gets cut short when Lapsua interrupts their conversation, telling the emperor that if they don't head back soon, then they'll be late for the next meeting. So sad to see that even the most powerful man in the empire is powerless in the face of things like this. Lapsua reminds him that he is the emperor, and he needs to set an example. As sad as it may be, it can't be helped. Instead of sulking, Asha asks his father when they can see each other again, much to the older man's surprise. The emperor can only sigh. If his son is not kicking up a fuss, then why should he? His son is so perfect that even the emperor finds that a problem in itself. The emperor almost squeezes the living daylights out of Asha as he asks his aide when the next visit is. But while waiting, he asks Hardy to take care of Asha in the meantime, which the latter happily obliges. While still in his father's arms, Asha asks if there's a chance he could meet his little brother. The older man's face instantly falls as he puts Asha back on his feet, explaining that the queen still doesn't want to take her eyes off the baby. She's anxious because it's her first child. Asha understands because he's a good boy, right? As the big brother, the emperor asks if he can count on Asha to become a good role model for his baby brother. Of course, Asha answers yes. Then, one fine summer day when Asha was 5, something happened that would mark a significant change in his life. Werrell knocks on the young lord's room, checking to see if he's awake. When the former sees that Asha is up, he asks where Hardy is, so Asha explains that she went downstairs to get breakfast for them. But what's up? Werrell walks closer, saying he has a gift to deliver, which is why he came in early today. The aide takes the young lord's hand, leading him somewhere, just as they bump into Ikto carrying several crates at once. The young lord couldn't help but ask if those were heavy, but Ikto says it's nothing. He carried a berserk grizzly bear before, remember? That one was much heavier than these. So here's the thing. Werrell tells Asha how he heard that the academy was throwing some stuff away. With that said, he asks if he could have them, and following this trail of conversation, Asha was quick to pick up. Could it be? Is that alchemy equipment? Asha excitedly runs over the crates, eager to see them. Werrell's just a beginner, but even to him, all of these look advanced. Be that as it may, he vouches for their quality since all of it came from the academy. Asha asks if the academy he's referring to is the one from the Luciasaria kingdom, which his aide confirms. He's surprised that the young lord remembers it. The thing is, Werrell heard from someone he knows over there that the kingdom was about to dispose of these, which is why he arranged to pick them up. Just then, Helkov appears from the back, also carrying a couple of crates, surprised that all of those items are for alchemy. He took a peek in one of the boxes, but he couldn't make heads or tails of it. The Beastkin aide adds that their current concern is where to stuff all the equipment. But, then again, it's not that concerning since they have a lot of rooms. Werrell laughs along, knowing that this is pretty fragile equipment though. Werrell also hands Asha an alchemy book, which he specifically borrowed for the young lord. Asha couldn't be more grateful, especially since he just finished the other one yesterday. All this alchemy equipment aside, Hardy finally appears, and even though she knows the young lord is excited about all this, she also reminds him that he has a walk for today's schedule. Besides, they don't have enough breakfast for this many people. With that, Asha decides to go along with his aunt. The garden is much bigger than the palace, with Hardy adding that there's even a grand fountain, a forest, and a pasture. It's like a whole other place on its own. But that's not all. The garden also houses 3 separate villas that are bigger than the front gate of the palace. In his 30-year-old mind, the idea of this much landmass is too much to grasp for a former commoner like him. After walking for a while, Hardy asks if he wants to stop and rest for a bit, but Asha says he's okay. That's when he turned and heard something. He quickly whips his head around, asking Hardy if she heard it too. She didn't, but Asha is relentless. He pulls her along with him as he runs over to one of the bushes yonder to check if there's a child crying. The young lord pushes past the bushes, and that's when he sees a child younger than him, crouched with his back turned to Asha. Asha quickly notices the dark blue hair that's common among imperial nobles, along with the high-quality clothes the child was wearing. At this age, there are only 2 people who can walk freely inside the palace, and Asha is one of them. With this in mind, he calls out to the younger boy in front of him, Teristras. At the sound of his name being called, the young boy tearfully looks up to Asha, asking who he is. Kawaii Core. Asha just knows this is his little brother, so he introduces himself and asks why the younger boy is crying. Meanwhile, Hardy watches from the back just as Ikto comes rushing to ask what happened. As for Asha, he can't believe he met his little brother in a place like this. On the other hand, seriously? They left the Emperor's son all on his own? Even Asha has a nanny following him around everywhere. Teristras finally opens his mouth, asking where he is. Oh, so he's lost. Asha extends his hand to the younger, asking if he wants to come along and look for someone with him. Teristra eyes him suspiciously, then finally tells Asha he's not supposed to go with strangers. Smart boy. At least he knows stranger danger, so he's got a promising future ahead. Asha calls him by his name and asks if he can just call him Terry. When the younger boy agrees, Asha assures him that this is not a scary place. Moreover, he asks Terry if he has seen the glowing flowers and singing trees right there. Terry shakes his head, which Asha finds unbelievably cute. Well, he extends his hand and tells Terry they should look for someone while checking out the pretty garden. The younger boy takes his hand, making Asha smile. Before they go, Asha signals Ikto to find the other guards, which the aide quickly does. So now that the brothers are together, Asha asks Terry what he was supposed to be doing today. Like him, Terry says he's out for a walk. Soon enough, they find the flowers, with Asha showing him some of the unique characteristics of the flora, just like this one. It lights up. Terry beams as Asha urges him to try it for himself and to handle it gently. Terry does as he's told, with his older brother asking him what color it was. This one is red, so they move to another one, which is blue. Terry takes one of the flowers in his hands and fumbles with it. Why is this one strange? That's because it's not a flower, it's a bee. Terry immediately pales and cries out in fear, falling back as he tries to get away from the insect. Hardy and Asha quickly check on him, with his older brother shooing the insect off. Hardy checks and notes that the bug doesn't sting, so there's no need to worry. But Terry is already in tears, clinging to his older brother tightly. Asha tries to calm him down, assuring Terry that he'll protect him when suddenly they hear someone shouting, asking what they're doing. It was quickly followed by hurried steps, ordering Asha to step away from Terry, as this lady snatches the ladder away from Asha's arms. The lady quickly checks on His Highness, assuring him that everything is okay now, before glaring back at Asha. Soon, a few palace guards appear, ready to draw their swords, as a shocked and scared Asha falls to the ground by what's happening. There was a flurry of movement, and suddenly, Ikto was standing in front of Asha, blocking the other guards from approaching the young lord. Ikto gives them an icy cold glare, asking what they were trying to do to his young master. After that incident, Asha got the chance to talk to his father about what happened with Terry. The other guards who raised their swords at him, a price, somehow got off with a light punishment. According to the Emperor, it's hard to overturn a decision once it's made. But for Asha, this incident is a wake-up call for him to sort out where he stands. He starts by asking a crying Hardy if he's still under His Majesty's guardianship. Hardy says the House of Nistaf serves as Asha's guardian, and now that he remembers it, he's an Iscalion, which is also a Nistaf. I know, confusing, right? But Nistaff or Iscalion, does that family even do anything for Asha? Hardy bawls her eyes out saying they don't. They do absolutely nothing. They haven't even checked in once ever since they left the estate. If that's the case, does Asha really need the Nistaff name? Hardy is more upset about all of this compared to how he is, so he's left to console her. Meanwhile, Helkov chimes in and tells the young lord that the Nistaff name is just for appearances. Since he's clever, surely he already knows about this. Well, if that was the case, Asha couldn't help but ask why they reacted so harshly when he was just with Terry back then. Helkov thinks that maybe there's a precedent, you know? Someone with a weak claim is seizing the throne. Asha is shocked to hear this. So if Terry was not in the picture, did they really think Asha would claim the throne? What is this? Do they see him as some kind of scheming villain? Asha finds this all absurd. They don't even care about what he believes in at all. With all this talk, Helkov and Werrell find it even harder to hear these words coming out of the young lord's mouth. Are normal 5-year-olds supposed to say stuff like this? Hardy finally calmed down enough to add more context to the situation. She says this is more of a faction issue. This is because the influence of the House of Lucaios, the Queen's family, keeps growing now that a legitimate heir has been born. Like all of us roped into this manga, Asha wonders if those nobles don't have anything better to do. Helkov explains that it's because running a country is not something an emperor can do alone. He needs those factions. Right now, the current emperor is relying on the Duke of Lucaios. With that said, for the Nistaff family who is now aligned with Lucaios, ignoring Asha is the safer bet. Our protagonist can't believe how bonding with his little brother turns out to be such a political minefield. But less of that now. Ikto appears and comes bearing great news. He made sure that those troublemakers from before were properly disciplined. He promises that from now on, something like that won't happen again. He looks a little too overjoyed at sharing this piece of information, so Asha has to warn him not to overdo it. Just like that, time passed, and right now, winter has come. Just like the beginning of this manga, the bells of blessings are ringing again. This time, Asha knows that his twin brothers were born safely. He never imagined that he'd be kept away from his sibling for that reason. But now, he has made his choice. Asha chose to be invisible so no one would think he had ambitions to become the heir. Or so he thought. Right now, Asha stands by the window by himself when he hears the door open. In comes Werrell carrying a book and other paraphernalia, apologizing to the young lord for coming in late. Asha, on the other hand, greets him with a smile while carrying a beaker in his hands. He tells his aide that he just came in early to place the laboratory apparatus and its content where the sun hits the window best. Werrell asks what kind of experiment the young lord is doing, to which our protagonist says that it started as distilled water. Asha explains that he made it using an alchemical distiller, and in his previous world, it's a classic method from science class. Of course, Werrell doesn't know the young master is reincarnated from another world, does he? This experiment is something you and I are familiar with. It's evaporating and recondensing to remove impurities. Asha dissolved salt into the water, so once it evaporates, salt crystals should form at the tip of the string that's partially submerged in the liquid. Plus, Asha says there's one more test and shows off the water spell Werrell taught him. Let's talk about Werrell. He's a mage and Asha's tutor, and more importantly, he knows a secret hack. You see, spells require incantations normally, but Werrell taught our protagonist a shortcut. He instructs the young master to just imagine the outcome he wishes for, stressing the importance of picturing a clear image in his head. Otherwise, it won't appear, because that's the thing about magic. If you hesitate or doubt, then the magic won't last. Like any good teacher, Werrell also taught Asha the importance of incantations. Chants help fix the image in one's mind, so the spell behaves as intended. In their lesson, Asha confirms if he's right in understanding it. So as long as you can clearly imagine the right amount of water coming out, it's good, right? Asha found that imagining the water coming out of a faucet works best for him, which is why he sticks with that method. Anyway, back to their experiment. Asha noticed that when he measured the mana levels, the magically created water had a reading. Even though it looks the same as the normal water, it's somehow different. Following this line of thought, he figured if he processed both waters the same way, maybe the end result would change too. This is a comparison experiment after all. These days, Asha spends most of his time doing alchemy like this, and it's made possible only because he has the right tools thanks to Werrell. This may just be a hobby for our protagonist, but it's the real deal. The only problem is that in this world, they have something unexplainable by science, magical particles called mana. This very thing makes it different from the alchemy he knows back on Earth. This poses a problem at times because some tools only work if you feed them mana. For others, you need to trigger spells inside sealed containers for chemical reactions, which is pretty wild, with all things considered. Werrell leans and watches Asha work on the experiment, asking the young lord if it's safe to handle an open flame. Asha assures him that it's safe, and besides, he needs to get used to this since the first step of his experiments always requires making pure water. Even in this world, our protagonist holds true to the basics of experimentation. You must eliminate variables that mess with your results, which is a staple even in science. For this experiment, Asha explains that he measured the same amount of salt using proper weights and a scale. Besides, for today, Ikto's watching over him, the latter leaning back on the wall. Now that he noticed it, Werrell also remembers that today's lesson is on Eastern Continent geography, suggesting that maybe Ikto can share a bit of knowledge about it too. At the mention of his name, Iktpo approaches them, asking Werrell if they will also cover the half-sea folks' homeland, Ninoto. Well, Werrell already has his book open and muses that maybe Asha might also be curious about Ikto's country. Werrell flips through the pages until he finally sees the map of Ninoto. He borrowed this illustrated book for this reason, after all, while Asha's eyes are already glued to the illustration. He turns to Isco, asking if his homeland has a Japanese vibe and if the Todos are a common family name there. Ikto says it's not exactly that, but for full disclosure, he goes by the name of Ixemon Toshiaki Todo in Ninoto. In Asha's mind, he can't help but notice how the latter's name sounds way more Japanese than he expected. Then there's Werrell, who struggles to pronounce Ikto's name. The half-sea folk doesn't take offense at it since he has already come to terms with the fact that most people can't pronounce his full name. This is why he created the name Ikto, as it's the shortened version of his name. Looking at him right now with his coral-colored hair, bluish skin, and fantasy look, Asha finds it hard to believe that Ikto is an Ixemon. Ikto continues that his race, Kaijin, or more commonly known as Sea Folk, originally came further south of the Chitos Federation. It used to be a collection of small countries, then later formed a federation under the Empire's rule. He asks if the young lord has already studied that part of history yet. Asha shares what he knows so far, which is that Chitos and Ninoto are two of the Empire's 12 major nations. Both nations didn't have much contact with each other until they joined the Empire. So Ikto was born there even though he's not technically native to Ninoto. He adds that these days trading and migration also take place between the two nations. Hearing all this, Werrell's surprised that his co-aide can actually teach as well. To add to this, Werrell also informs Asha that the Empire's roots extend to the Eastern Continent, and it's not just Ninoto, so it's also worth learning. With that, the combined lecture of Werrell and Ninoto began as Asha's social studies lesson for the day. Werrell continues that the central continent where the Empire is currently located remained undeveloped for a long time. As the teacher, he asks if the young lord still remembers why. Asha answers that mountains surround it and have no passable routes. Back then, humans originally lived mostly in the east, but now most of them have relocated to the central continent. Outside the Empire, Ninoto has the largest human population. Ironically enough, it used to be just a small country. Upon hearing that, Asha asks if any of the other major countries exist today. But this time, it's Ikto who answers. The half-sea folk share that the East suffers from frequent natural disasters. So after the Empire was formed, more humans relocated to the central region since it was a better option than trying to rebuild ruined cities. But even if they moved to the central region, disasters still came yearly like clockwork. Then how did Ninoto even survive? Well, Ikto believes that Ninoto, along with its people, is the most resilient one out there. They're practically disaster-resistant. Even if they've suffered one calamity after another like typhoons or eruptions, by the next day, the people will already be up cleaning and rebuilding the whole place. Asha hangs his head low when he hears that. Well, his previous life is not that different compared to the people of Ninoto. But just hearing the account from someone else makes it sound more intense. It's no wonder his ancestors risked crossing those mountains. Japanese mentality aside, he wonders if Ninoto is also home to samurai and yokai. Since he's already at it, the young lord asks Ikto if his country also has different monsters or warriors. You know, like the equivalent of knights. The latter answers that it really doesn't differ that much from the Empire, but there is one thing. He asks the young lord if he has heard of curses that magic can undo. Werrell adds that even elves and beastkin have legends about curses too, but highlights that magic works differently depending on your race. There's Ikto, who uses water as part of the sea folk. Werrell, a half-elf, uses the wind, and Helkoff, an actual beastkin, uses physical enhancement magic. Compared to them, humans can't master magic, but they can use every element. Asha clarifies if it's true that they can't deal with curses despite being masters of the element, given how curses and magic are different. Still, is it possible to cast a curse even if you can't use magic? Ikto tells him that there's a certain peculiar case. Now this one supposedly came from a regular creature with no magic at all, called the Crab's Curse. Legend says there's a man who loved crabs and couldn't stop eating them. The man ate crabs every day until one day, touching crabs caused his body to break out into red rashes. Still, he loved crabs, so he kept eating them because he couldn't help it, against the advice of everyone around him. As the man continued to eat, he started to wheeze and stumble until eventually he died. Because of what happened to him, it became a cautionary tale. Even a tiny life, if abused long enough, can curse you. Asha sat dumbfounded throughout the whole story because what the hell? Isn't that just an allergy? Besides, it's still possible for adults to develop shellfish allergies well into adulthood. At least now he knows that allergies exist in this world too, and that magic doesn't help cure them. Just then, a thought crosses his mind. Maybe alchemy can fix it. As the first prince, our protagonist is already caught up in political games, which is why when he took up alchemy as a hobby, it might have been a blessing in disguise. The next day, the first thing Asha does is check on his experiment to see if anything happened to the water. Based on his observation, the magically created water formed smaller, misshapen crystals. He notes that he probably should have made the setup more consistent. Well, since he's already at it, he decides to move it to the sunny window and wraps up for the day. As soon as he and Hardy walk out of the drawing room, they're both surprised and confused that the receiving area is empty. Hardy looks around, worried that none of them are here even after breakfast when they hear a knock on the door. Suddenly, all three of them came bursting through, calling Asha out as they did so. Ikto apologizes for coming in late, while Helkov informs them that someone's been digging into Asha's affairs. Now that came as a shocker, because why? And who is it? Werrel relays how a royal scholar approached him, while Helkov chimes in that some army colleagues of his also asked him some things. Asha doesn't get it. Why do they keep asking about him when he hasn't even done anything? What's there to investigate? The trio exchange glances and Werrel reveals that he told the scholar that the young prince started studying magic when he was 6 and that he's gifted. Helkov too sang praises of Asha, saying that even though it's pretty early for the prince to take on sword training, he's pretty fast and is more focused on movement. And then there's Ikto. Ikto said that the young prince is not only motivated in everything he does, but he's also pretty wise too. Hearing all the good things his aide has to say about him is nice, but in his position it might not be so great. For one, our protagonist doesn't care about the throne, so being investigated like this doesn't bother him at all. Still, there's a chance that people might try to use him. It has already been 3 years since His Majesty took the throne, and things are starting to stabilize even though they're not perfect yet. With that said, Asha thinks some people might try to frame him as Terry's rival just to trip the Emperor, which is why he stresses to his aides that compliments about him are dangerous. It would be bad for Asha if rumors started going around that he's more capable, and that he should rule as the Emperor. His brother's maternal grandfather, the Duke, is pretty sensitive right now, so stirring him up could make the Emperor worry too much, and throw off His Majesty's rhythm. Asha was so busy voicing out the possible scenarios that he failed to notice his aides were looking at him strangely, until they all spoke in unison about how the young lord's cleverness is really something else. Asha never even thought about that, so he asks if he's doing something that's making him stand out. He's been practically holed up in his room most of his life. Well, Werrel points out that the young master's library usage is recorded and points out that Asha has read more books than most adults. Well, if that's the case, he'll just lay off on the library for now, as much as it breaks his heart. With a forlorn spirit, Asha decides he'll keep a low profile and urges his aides to do the same. Seeing him so heartbroken like this, Hardy asks the young master if he's really sure about this, and Asha says yes. He beams, saying he doesn't want to be a burden, and in his mind he'd rather hold himself back than drag his family down. Even through his smile, his aides couldn't help but cast a worried look over him. Our protagonist really believes that if he just endures it, then things will smooth themselves out quietly. Or so he thought, and that's where he's wrong. It didn't even take long for things to start unraveling, as a few days later news came to him that Ikto was being reassigned. Of course, Ikto protested that no one even asked his Lord Asha's opinion about this. Asha asks worriedly if Ikto can still stay as his guard, but the latter claims that it's unlikely. After all, Asha is only with him under the Emperor's order. Guard assignments fall under the commander's jurisdiction. Asha asks who the commander is, and Werrel answers that it's Marquis Stratege. Hardy adds that the Marquis is considered politically neutral, but leans toward Duke Eurasian's camp. At the mention of the family's name, Asha turns to confirm if they were the house founded by the previous emperor's brother. Hardy confirms that it is. If the old emperor hadn't insisted that his own child succeed him on his deathbed, then Duke Eurasian might have become the emperor instead. Asha asks Hardy if there's any reason for the Duke to meddle in the emperor's staffing decisions. The latter says there's no immediate gain, but if the Duke can override a decision made by the emperor, then it could set a precedent and boost their influence. If it's like that, Asha thinks that maybe Marquis Stratege just doesn't like taking orders from the Emperor since His Majesty used to be a count. Ikto adds that the Marquis is the type to form a small, independent faction rather than submit to a Duke. With that said, he believes the Duke wouldn't do something with zero benefit. The young lord notes how even Ikto thinks that the Duke is a careful player, but at this point, they can't even say that the House of Eurasian is behind this. If this is the case, Asha considers the possibility that maybe they're testing him. Maybe they're trying to see if he's the kind of prince who quietly accepts unfair treatment, or if he's the type to step up and take action. So is that it? Are they sizing him up? If that's the case, staying quiet would draw less attention, but if someone's willing to use their position to come after me, then it will most likely happen again. Asha can't let this slide, so he has decided he wants to hit back hard now so they won't try it again. Ikto asks if he's sure about this, since it may stir up even more unpleasant rumors if he does this. As much as he hates it, Asha is sure. It's pretty frustrating on his part, especially since he can't even meet his little brother. What's wrong with trying to see your younger sibling? Asha tells them that they have to act this time. Helkov looks pretty eager already, asking the young lord if he has a plan. He does have a plan, and it's pretty simple. Asha is going to speak with His Majesty directly. With that, he asks Hardy to help him get dressed, much to the latter's surprise. Still, she does as he instructed, while Asha remembers that they need to find where the Emperor is first. Ikto says they just need to look for where the guards are stationed nearby. So with that, the young lord tells Ikto that he's going with him. Helkov happily volunteers, but Werrel cuts him off, saying that the beastkin will stand out too much. However, someone like Werrel, who looks harmless and is easily underestimated on sight, may be a better escort for the prince since they can catch them off guard. He may look gentle, but no one's being fooled by that menacing smile on Werrel's face. All in all, Asha's pretty impressed at how fired up everyone is right now. He appreciates their enthusiasm, but right now, Asha only needs one person with him. If something happens, he can't protect more than that. Speaking of protection, our protagonist notes how he's always being protected by everyone, but this time, he'll be the one protecting them. And with that, he and Ikto march off to find the Emperor. Well, it didn't take long for Asha and Ikto to find where the guards are stationed, but instead of allowing the young prince to see the Emperor, the guards stationed at the door refused them entry. Naturally, Asha's upset with this because he's only asking for an audience with His Majesty. Why are they denying him that? The grumpy guard tells the young prince that they can't allow interruptions during official duties, especially not from someone who caused a disturbance the other day. So they don't even allow an audience with the Emperor even if it's an emergency? The other guard turns away, refusing to look at Asha as he says that His Majesty has given no such permission. Well, it's pretty clear to our protagonist that these guards don't even see him as a prince at all. Of course, Asha wants to know what their names are, given how they flat out denied a prince his rights. And just look at this guard saying he has no obligation to tell Asha his name. At least they're aware that they're doing something they'll get in trouble for later. With that, Asha motions for Ikto to come forward. The latter bends over to hear what the prince has to say. Since it has come to this, they're left with no choice but to do something improper. Suddenly, Asha starts stripping his clothes off, much to the guard's alarm. Our protagonist tells them that they're free to check him if they're that suspicious of him. The two made no move and exchanged glances, so Asha continued to trip, thus increasing their worry. Meanwhile, Ikto has his back turned against Asha, so he can't see the prince undressing. By the time Asha removes her vest, it's time to make a move. Ikto runs past the guards and heads straight to the door but stops in front of it to yell out Prince Asha's name. The young prince beamed while the guards stood in shock. There was some rustling on the opposite side of the door when suddenly the Emperor himself opened it, asking what was going on with Asha. To his surprise, he sees Asha almost in his undergarments, head bowed as he apologizes for the sudden intrusion. The young prince turns to the guard, explaining to his father how he kept treating Asha like a threat. So to prove that he wasn't carrying anything dangerous, Asha resolved to strip his clothes off. His Majesty glares at the guard, the latter jolting in fear as he hurriedly picks up Asha's clothes on the floor before the Emperor snatches them from his hands. The Emperor puts the clothes over Asha's shoulder as he ushers him inside, but not before ordering the guard to report to his commander immediately. As they entered the room, Asha's father quickly apologized to someone, asking them to wait for a little longer while ushering his son inside. So he was in a meeting. Our protagonist feels bad for interrupting, but the fact that his father came running when he heard his name left him feeling touched. Since the Emperor is on business, Asha decides to keep this short. He immediately opens up about his concern about Ikto being reassigned. With that said, the young prince asks his father if this was His Majesty's decision. From the way his brows furrowed, it looks like the Emperor has no hand in any of this, turning to the figure behind him as His Majesty asks what all this was about. An older man in uniform with stern features and thick brows. It was Marquis Stratege. Well, this just confirms that the Emperor is currently in an official meeting with the Marquis. As for the Marquis himself, he explains that it's standard protocol to rotate the palace guards every 2 to 3 years, so there's nothing unusual about it. He asks if there's a problem with that. But, as if that was protocol, then Ikto wouldn't have called his reassignment sudden. The Emperor knows Ikto and Asha are pretty close, which is why he also trusts Ikto. He asks the Marquis if they could just keep things the way they are. If he needs to, the Emperor can just place Ikto under his direct command. The Marquis replies that there are no issues as long as nothing changes. Although the latter opens up that there have been growing concerns over staff shortages in relation to room size. Since it's like that, the older man also said that they were planning to increase personnel as well, asking His Majesty what his thoughts are about this. Obviously, Asha also didn't know about that, but that sure does sound like a setup to send someone else in. Immediate concerns aside, Asha has now seen with his own eyes how Marquis Stratege never misses a chance to gain something. Later, once Asha and Ikto had returned to their chambers, Hardy couldn't help but cry in frustration at how the young prince was denied access to his own father, the Emperor. Asha's aunt feels so bad for him, pitying how they expect this child to endure so much. Considering he has no mother and a busy father, along with his royal status and the court politics, it's definitely a lot for a child to handle. In her eyes, he's pitiful, and not being able to do anything has been pretty frustrating for her. In all honesty, our protagonist isn't really bothered by all this since he didn't have the closest family ties in his previous life. Sure, he wants to talk to his father, but if it means he'd have to deal with those picking at him, then Asha would rather not do so. Anyway, Asha consoles his aunt, saying at least they got something valuable out of this. Because of what happened, the Emperor is now setting up a direct emergency line between them. As for the fiasco with Terry's guards from a few days ago, Asha heard that those 3 guards who raised their swords at him resigned voluntarily after angering the Emperor. Not surprisingly, however, the word spread, claiming that Asha was the one who got them fired. If the same thing happened to the new guards he encountered earlier, then there's a chance that Asha will be blamed again. But because of this, our protagonist is now on Marquis Stratege's radar, and they're adding more guards. Helkov points out that adding guards isn't the problem per se, since usually those guys get assigned to guard posts because of noble connections. Most, if not all of them, don't even know about real combat. The Beastkin also adds that they won't send that many, so just posting them at the gates should do. Ikto thinks so too, saying that if Marquis Stratege adds too many here, then he would only get pushed back. Werrell has an added insight and shares that there's another possibility wherein the Marquis may plant someone loyal to him along with them. His biggest reason for acting is probably that he knows nothing about Asha. Even our protagonist can't deny that point. In a court full of scheming nobles, it would be a huge issue for them if he were gunning for the throne or not, even though we all know he's too preoccupied with alchemy as it is. Still, he can't help but sigh at how those nobles don't trust him at all, despite his best efforts at keeping to himself. All this thinking is giving him a headache. In the end, Asha just asks his aide the biggest question of all. If the Marquis really thought he, the first prince, had his eyes on the throne, would he stop Asha, or will he try to use him? Helkov answers that if the Marquis wants to protect his current standing, then he'd support the current emperor's rule. If that's the case, it would also mean that he's not that pleased to see a weakly backed prince gain attention. So is the Marquis trying to probe Asha? Is that why he wants to send someone to watch over the first prince? If this is the case, then he could turn it around and find out what the Marquis's intentions are. On the other hand, what does he care? Asha knows better than to get himself involved in palace politics like this. Right now, he should just stay the same, the quiet first prince who's into alchemy. Maybe someday, once they realize and accept that Asha really has no ambition to claim the throne, he'll get to see Terry again, not just him, but his other little brothers as well. Yeah, this checks out just fine. Our protagonist thought that annoying people would come and go. He'll just need to wait them out quietly. For now, he thinks he should review the rare plants in the garden ahead of schedule. Once again, Asha is proven wrong. He's too naive. The next day, the Marquis summoned Ikto, as told by a certain guard who said the Marquis had been looking for the half-sea folk before his shift. According to this guard, there's something about a document that needs Ikto's personal confirmation or something. It was pretty obvious that this guard had an ulterior motive, as he happily sends Ikto off and claims to take the latter's position as Asha's guard. Once Ikto is gone, this brazen fellow cheerfully greets them and introduces himself as Revan Daphne Yarni Mildoadis, Asha's new personal guard. The prince only glares at him in return because in Asha's mind, he didn't even give Revan permission to speak. That's a complete breach of etiquette. Clearly, the new guy is looking down on him. If the Marquis really meant to send this guy, then he sure picked a nasty one, huh? Revan remains unfazed by the glares both Asha and Hardy are giving him as he decides he'll start his inspection. Hardy tells him that it's not necessary since she already did that this morning. She also tells him that if Revan is really intent on becoming Asha's guard, then he should stay against the wall and not waste their time. Revan is unrelenting, saying he can't leave it all to Lady Hardy. Besides, he's the pro here, so he's the one who knows the danger zones and all that. If Revan is hell-bent on pushing all of the prince's buttons, then he's doing a fantastic job so far. Asha remains tight-lipped around him, but he's still annoyed at how Revan continues to ignore him. Isn't he supposed to keep his eyes on the prince? Plus, the new guard is not correcting his rude behavior at all. If it's like his, fine. Two can play this game. Asha decides he'll ignore Revan too. The prince instructs Hardy to lock every room except the blue room, which she easily obliges. But before she can do so, Revan blocks Hardy's path and extends his hand. With a smile, she tells her that this is his job as their guard, so it's best that she hands over the key. This time, Hardy retaliates, saying this key is entrusted to her in His Majesty's name. Revan has no authority over it, so he should step back. Revan feigns his terror over her stand, obviously mocking Hardy, but just as quickly his expression changed, saying that if she keeps being uptight like that, she'll never get herself a new man. Asha clenches his fist tighter in both anger and frustration. This sick fellow really said that, knowing Hardy's a widow. That was on purpose. You see, when Hardy's husband died, she returned home with their daughter. Her family, the Viscount's house, had already passed to her older brother, so they couldn't help much. In the end, Asha's parents asked her to become the prince's nursemaid. Hardy is someone his parents care about a lot, and for this brazen guard to mock her like that? Unforgivable. So to keep him from harassing Hardy, Asha tells his nanny to just give him the key. Meanwhile, he'll get ready for his music class. Music class proceeded as normal, save for the Revan, who kept wandering around the room. He checks the curtains, every nook and cranny, looking for God knows what. In the corner of his eyes, Asha observes him quietly. So this is a so-called patrol guard, huh? Judging by his actions alone, Revan looks more like he's sizing up the place to rob it. Seriously, he's really annoying, but then again, maybe this guard is trying to provoke Asha into a reaction. Just then, there was a knock on the door, which Revan happily points out to Hardy, telling her to get it. But she's no fool. Why should she leave the likes of him with the young prince? Revan assures her that he can take care of Asha. Besides, why is she so uptight anyway? Did someone who's not supposed to come up just show up? Hardy counters him that if he really believes that, then he can answer the door for himself. But Revan is steadfast in his role as the personal guard. He can't leave his post, can he? In the end, Asha urges Hardy to check the door. It's probably just Helkov. The nursemaid takes one last worried look before doing as the prince instructed. Revan's a little surprised that it's the bear soldier. But now that it's just him and Asha, he continues to check the place, focusing on the fireplace this time. Revan notes how they must be hiding something with the way they stripped the whole place bare. Asha only stares back at him while reaching for his experiments by the window. To begin with, this place has always been empty. Revan sees him reaching out for his beaker, curious about what that glass thing is. Asha continues to ignore him. And it looks like this is the guard's first time seeing a beaker. He probably didn't have science class, huh? Asha pulls the string off the beaker and sees that the salt has crystallized on the tip. By now, Revan is already beside him, asking about this clear magic stone in a mocking voice. Seriously, our protagonist can only hold out for so long. He really finds Revan's smug tone irritating. Just then, he hears voices from the other room, which probably means Hardy and the others are back. Wait a minute, this could be his chance. In a split-second decision, Asha decides to do something a little risky, as he raises the beaker over his head ready to smash it. Well, it was Revan who brought up being alone together, so if something happens, it's on him. There was a loud crash, and not a moment later, Hardy and Helkov came running, worried about the sound they had just heard. Asha's left hand is bleeding profusely, making Hardy even more worried as she sees the young prince is injured. Then there's Helkov, who quickly tackles Revan to the ground as he asks what happened. Revan falls face first on the floor with the beastkin on top of him. Just then, Asha walks over to him, saying how the guard is in a pinch, seeing how the prince is injured while alone with a guard personally sent by Marquis Stratege. That's a bit of a problem, right? Even Revan can't rebut that. Meanwhile, Asha casually checks his hand and asks for a doctor. He wants to avoid a huge fuss, so he urges them to inform the Marquis of what happened and have the latter send a physician himself. Then there's Hardy, already fuming as Helkov escorts Revan away. Oh, our protagonist just knows he's going to get an earful of scolding later for the stunt he just pulled. Besides that, he also used the super concentrated salt water meant for the crystal experiment, and in all honesty, it burns like hell. Marquis Stratege personally made an appearance as he humbly apologized for this incident. Asha looks at him wordlessly while the physician tends to his wounds. The young prince asked the doctor if his injury would heal before he saw his father, and the Marquis apologized even more profusely this time. In Asha's defense, he just asked. It was not a threat or anything like that. Meanwhile, Hardy went all out, scolding the Marquis even though he was much older than she was. Marquis Stratege accepted it all since he probably doesn't want this to reach the Emperor. Just like that, the rude guard named Revan was successfully sent away, along with a formal apology. On the other hand, here's Asha surrounded by his aides, being scolded non-stop for that ridiculous stunt he pulled. It was way too dangerous after all. Their scolding got cut short by the return of Ikto. Even he told Asha that the prince's method was extreme. However, he came bearing good news. Ikto did the honor of securing the authority to assign Asha's guard by himself. So with that, it looks like the crazy plan worked. Maybe now, Asha will finally have some peace and everybody will be happy. Well, that happiness lasted for a fraction of a second because by then, Asha finds himself being scolded again, and this time, by 4 people. One day, Asha finally understood why Marquis Stratege targeted him when he was 7 years old. It was because the Marquise's political rival was trying to get close to him. His aides found out and shared this new piece of information with him, but young Asha still doesn't understand why. There's no advantage in getting close to a discarded prince like him, right? He's the lowest ranked out of all the princes, both in status and succession rights. But apparently, the other camp noticed the strange reassignment and started investigating Asha through their own contacts. There's not much to go on with Asha anyway, since his aides don't come from particularly high status. Ikto's a baron of the new nobility and Hardy is from a viscount family. Given their positions, they don't have that many ties within the palace. Werrel and Helkov don't even come from noble families at all. Be that as it may, Werrel points out that even if Asha is ranked low, he still has royal blood. For families who don't even have that, it's a chance worth gambling everything on. After all, the current emperor also rose to power through such a twist of fate. Helkov tells them as he sees it, Asha is being targeted. Ikto adds that Marquis Stratege has ties to foreign nobility, and it looks like his attempt to control Asha is part of the aftermath of a power struggle abroad. When they lay it down like that, it simply means that Asha is the ideal prey for someone who is looking to expand their influence under the Empire's name. The Empire is made up of multiple nations after all, and yet, each one still has its own royal family and noble class. Hardy decides to step in, putting a stop to their conversation as she comes in, carrying the young lord's breakfast, but not without reprimanding Asha for speaking like that. Asha eats his breakfast quietly while contemplating everything his aides shared with him. Of course, he's thankful for everything they found, but for some reason, Asha can't shake the feeling that there's something deeper going on with Marquis Stratege. First of all, he finds it too convenient that they're only finding out about this now. It feels like the Marquis noticed they were running their own investigation and deliberately tossed Asha's camp a few harmless facts to keep them busy. But this could also mean that the Marquis is acting under someone else's orders and testing the prince. Werrel's voice cuts through the prince's line of thought as the former asks if he'll be continuing his alchemy studies today, because if he were, Werrel happily hands him a new book. Asha gratefully takes it, and on that fateful day our protagonist found out just how deep alchemy could go. Right now, Asha and Werrel are staring intently at the unknown matter that seems to be floating and shimmering inside the flask. Werrel asks if the young prince has any idea what it is, but given its unusual state, Asha has no way of identifying it. If you're wondering how they came to this, the prince separated the components of the heir, but when he broke it all down, all that was left behind was this. What a pretty strange thing given how this was supposed to be just a simple science experiment for the prince. But maybe this is because this world has magic. Asha did a lot of things to get a reaction out of it. He tried immersing it in hot water and even sealing it in a low-pressure flask, but it barely reacted at all. This thing, whatever it was, defies all the rules of physics. Helkov and Ikto stood watching as the young prince did his experiments, finding his perception remarkable. Even Ikto remarks how the idea of breaking down the air is incredible. Well, Asha tells them that this may be magic essence, but he's not too sure about it yet. While Ikto and Helkov stand clueless about what Asha just said, Werrel already has an understanding of what it is. Asha flips through his alchemy book, explaining to the two how, in this world, magic essence is sometimes called mana, believed to be the source of all magic. Wherever mana gathers, strange phenomena happen. Werrel says areas that are rich in mana are believed to bring good fortune, and some even claim you can manipulate the weather if you master it. Meanwhile, the power individuals are born with is called magic power, or OD, which is believed to be generated within the body. Ikto says magic users can sense their own magical energy, but magic essence is something else entirely. That's correct. Asha adds that, unlike OD, which can be felt directly, mana can only be noticed when it triggers a physical change. First and foremost, mana is invisible. But when it becomes fire or lightning, that's when it can finally be seen. Werrel also says that people talk about magic essence, but no one has ever seen it. The next moment he becomes all pumped up because if what Asha really has inside this flask is magic essence, then it's something no mage in history has ever managed to visualize. Helkov had to pull Werrel back since the latter ended up getting ahead of himself. Asha replies that it may be so. He also wants to know what this thing is, but he doesn't want to tell anyone about it yet because if it were that easy to find, someone would have done it already. The prince continues to flip through the book, noticing how it doesn't mention anything further about magic essence. It practically shifts to a different topic about the soul and consciousness. The body is physical and the mind, even though it's invisible, is tied to matter. According to the book, the spirit is considered to exist on another plane, even if it resides in the body. That other plane is the domain of the divine, which is an intro to theology. Asha was so absorbed in his book that he noticed late how his aides were talking about him behind his back. But all good things. Ikto commends the prince's personal interest in alchemy, claiming that it won't go to waste even if it hasn't fully blossomed yet. Then there's Helkov saying even though Asha won't dive into politics, It's important to carve a place for yourself, which is, in a way, a form of self-defense. Wirral also adds his 2 cents, saying that even though Asha acts mature, he's still just a 7-year-old, and it's too early for independence. Still, there are already moves to declare him of age and send him away. Asha hears all these things, and it makes him think about how politics move with or without his input. Obviously, he doesn't want to get involved. If the answer to that is because he was born a prince, then he has no excuse. But then again, he's never even treated like a prince, so why should he shoulder the burden of being one? Just thinking about it also made him consider that maybe it's also his fault for turning a blind eye. Still, he can't let go of his past life, which circles back to the ultimate question. Why was he even born a prince in the first place? Was it pure coincidence? What separates his current self from his former life? His body may have changed, but his thoughts are still the same, which makes him still the same person. In a quiet voice, Asha mutters, "I think therefore I am," which is a famous line from his previous life. To his surprise, someone or something answers back, "So it is." Asha screams out of fear, so Ikto comes running, ready to draw his sword as he asks the prince if he's hurt. Asha, on the other hand, has his eyes glued on that thing inside the flask. It continues to speak, listing down the variations of the quote Asha just said, "I think, therefore I am. I exist, therefore I am here. And I affirm myself, and that proves I exist." Finally, the entity tells Asha this, "I am the one inside this flask, therefore I am." After a beat, something absurd just occurred in our protagonist's mind. Did he just catch a ghost? But scary situation aside, there's a downfall to this. If this thing is self-aware, he can't keep using it like a lab sample. If this were mana, he could continue experimenting, but if this thing were a ghost, hell, they might even be related, given how this place was once a royal chamber. Now all 4 of them are gathered around the flask, with the exception of Hardy. So what happened is that Asha kept applying stimuli to the entity, and it triggered its self-awareness. As if to answer his claim, the thing inside the flask questions what stimuli and self-awareness are, asking Asha to elaborate, so this thing seems to have only just become aware of itself. Sure, it can reply, but only to Asha, and its vocabulary is extremely limited. When the prince asked if it was a ghost, it said no, and when Asha tried to open the flask, it kept screaming no, saying that it would vanish. Surprisingly, it learns in real time and mimics the words Asha uses. As a man of science, of course, our protagonist is eager to learn how this entity is learning things so fast. Just then, Wirral appears carrying a book, which he hands over to the prince. Asha asks if he's heard about any concerns lately, given how the prince has been asking Wirral to borrow books for him. He wants to know if there are any issues. Asha is ready to deal with them. Helkoff fills him in, saying that rumors have begun to spread about how Asha is into alchemy, but because he's only requesting relevant materials, no one has intervened. Wirral knows why. It's because alchemy is seen as something shallow. For them, it's just a hobby for people chasing gold, and even among scholars it has fallen out of fashion. The Imperial Library just has more old archives than most. Asha never thought that the nobles viewed alchemy as something vulgar just because of the gold-making rumors. Can't they understand that it's a genuine scientific pursuit? For Asha, he finds it is really interesting and you can actually make gold, but it's wildly expensive. Anyone doing alchemy is not in it for the money, so calling it vulgar seems unfair. Ikto's surprised because he always thought it was easy, which is another misconception held by many. In theory, all matter is made of atoms, but even in scientifically advanced places like Japan, you'd need enormous energy and technology to manipulate them. You'd have to break and rebuild protons and neutrons to change one element into another. And yes, you need to do all of that just to produce a single atom. But in this world, it's probably not feasible. Asha was so deep in thought that Wirral had to gently call out to him. To his surprise, his aides are all smiling at him, admiring how the young prince really loves alchemy. Wirral shares that one of his old teachers said that alchemy is a study to uncover how God created the world, prompting him to ask Asha what he thought of that. Well, the prince also thinks that alchemy might have answers to such a question too. Helkoff points out that making gold and discovering the secrets of creation feel like 2 very different pursuits, something Asha agrees with. Some mages chase the magical truth while others want new spells. Then some also wish to pursue wealth. In the case of Wirral's colleague, they lean more on seeking the world's structure. Even Asha wants to do something with alchemy too, but the thing is, he doesn't know what it is yet. At least for starters, he wants to find practical uses for it. Upon hearing that, the entity inside the flasks asked what practical means. The prince flicks the flasks in answer because that's the thing. He doesn't know because he hasn't figured it out yet. Still, Asha is mesmerized by the mystery that surrounds the entity inside the flask. Where does its awareness come from? How can it store information? How can this think without a body? So many questions and yet no answers. Wait a minute, this could be something huge. Like before, the entity asks what huge means, but it never knew then since Hardy calls for Asha right then and there. The entity asks again for clarification, but the prince needs to go. Asha waves goodbye to that thing inside the flask, saying he'll elaborate later. Asha is off in a hurry because today he's going to meet his father, the emperor. Actually, it's Asha's birth month, and in this world people celebrate the month they were born, not the day. While helping him dress up, Hardy strikes up a conversation about how Asha seems to be fond of that thing inside the flask. Does he have any idea what it is? The prince says he's still searching for answers, which, in itself, is the whole point of alchemy. Hardy has her brows furrowed, asking how alchemy can make something like that. But that's exactly what alchemy is. He explains that the word itself means to seek the method of transforming matter. So yes, that means elixirs and even the pursuit of godhood are under alchemy. Despite his explanation, Hardy still can't fully comprehend alchemy, just like Helkov. The Beastkin thinks it's all nonsense, while Ikto insists that it's a metaphor. Only Werrel tries to understand what Asha is doing, which goes to show that people really need better science education. Suddenly, the thing in the flask speaks and tells Asha that it wants to come with him. The prince waves it off, saying he can't exactly go around carrying a talking flask with him. Wait a minute, they're in his bedroom. Wasn't the flask placed in the other room? The prince suddenly runs off to check the other room, and to his surprise, the entity inside the flask is gone. He whirls around looking for it when the entity answers that it's in the room. But wait, didn't the entity say it would vanish once Asha removes the cork? Did it pass through the glass because it doesn't have a body? No, even gas can't move like that. Whatever the case may be, fine. Asha says aloud that since he can't contain the entity, he'll allow it to come with him, as long as it stays close to him. Also, he forbade the entity from talking to anyone except for Asha, whom the latter agreed to. Our protagonist can't believe how the entity is developing pretty quickly, and right now it has decided to observe Asha. Speaking of Asha, he bows in front of the emperor, as the latter smiles warmly at him. Asha's father thanks him for being born, saying how happy he is that they get to celebrate another year together. Asha echoes the sentiment, but with more formality, and even extends his gratitude to his late mother. With that, the emperor takes Asha in his arms and lifts him up in the air, just like he used to back then. As for our protagonist, he's happy that the emperor still lifts him up when they meet. But come on man, he's already 7. His real 30-year-old self thinks that it's about time his father stops treating him like a toddler. Then there's Lavsua, who's quick to reprimand the emperor from the back, asking him to show restraint. Of course, Asha's father counters that this is the best way to check how much his son has grown. In his mind, at least our protagonist knows the reason why the emperor likes lifting him up whenever they meet. On the other hand, he hopes his old man won't blame him when his back gives out one day. The emperor puts him down and then gestures to the gifts he bought for the prince. This year, His Majesty had some clothes made again to celebrate Asha's birthday, hoping his son would like them. Asha smiles and thanks his father, like clockwork. You see, every year on his birthday, the emperor gives him clothes like matching shirts, scarves, shoes, and accessories. You know, a whole wardrobe, which includes riding gear and sleepwear. The truth is, our protagonist doesn't have any other chance to get new clothes outside of his birthday present. Count Nistaf, Asha's guardian, never checked in on him, so the poor prince doesn't even have his own tailor. This is why when the emperor asked Hardy for ideas for Asha's gifts, the prince had him make something Asha actually needed, while also pretending it was something he wanted, without telling the real reason, of course. How ironic though, because isn't Count Nistaf supposed to be on the emperor's side? That's when Asha notices that there are 2 sets of formal wear included in his father's gifts. That's weird, he only usually wears that when he meets the emperor. Asha was hoping he'd get more practical clothes, but the reason for the other formal wear reveals itself the next moment. As if on cue, the emperor tells his son that there's another thing he'd like to discuss. They sat together as his father bore him news that next month, the royal family of Lucisaria would be paying a courtesy visit. During their stay, there will be a tea party and Asha is expected to attend. He what? Him? Like at a formal occasion? His father smiles, assuring him that there will also be a prince and princess around Asha's age, so he might even make friends. But all our protagonist can think about is that this is an official event. Asha checks Lavsua's reaction and the emperor's aide turns away, which somehow confirms Asha's suspicions. It's not like he'll get accused of looking the wrong way, but if no one said anything, then this must mean it's already decided. This event is what the other set of formal wear is for, but still, it would have been nice if Asha had had a little heads up. Since it's already decided, our protagonist just decides to roll with it and asks if his brother Terry will come along. The emperor says he's not, since Terry is only 4. It's too early for the second prince's etiquette training. But now that he thinks about it, didn't Asha learn his manners at that age? Asha says it's all thanks to Hardy because she's such a good teacher. Anyway, Asha is curious about his little brother, asking about what he's learning, as well as how the queen and the twins are doing. His father says there is learning how to read and write, and happily shares how one twin, Warnell, is livelier than his other half, Fel. Seeing the emperor like this, Asha is glad to know that his brothers are doing well, as evidenced by how the Emperor dotes on his youngest the most. Asha himself feels a little jealous, but it still warms his heart to know about his siblings. Just like that, his meeting with His Majesty ended. Afterward, Helkoff and the others came to help put away Asha's gifts. While doing so, Hardy asks if what he did was okay. After all, the prince has already mastered the languages of several nations, yet didn't even say a word about it to the Emperor. As always, Asha lives by his rule that staying quiet is his way of staying out of trouble. Besides, he doesn't want to add a burden to his father. He may be Asha's father, but he is the Emperor first and foremost. Telling him about the prince's achievements wouldn't help His Majesty in any way. Asha's happy enough he got to see his father and celebrate, but even so, Werrell points out how the prince has shown remarkable promise in a field most have long abandoned. Isn't that already a contribution in itself? Helkoff thinks so too, because honestly he didn't expect someone to advance this far just by reading books. Ikto says it has got to be Asha's talent at this point. Humble as ever, Asha points out that he's doing alchemy because it's just a fun hobby. He's not doing it because he wants to be praised for it. But now that Werrell mentions it, the prince finds it strange how such a useful field fell out of line for just being hard. Personally, Asha finds it amazing. It's pretty practical, so it shouldn't have fallen out of favor like this. And in his mind, it's not like our protagonist can go around saying he was the Full Metal Alchemist in his previous life. All things cast aside, Asha decides that he'll put all of his focus on studying that thing inside the flask. But Hardy has better plans. She reminds him that the tea party with the royal family of Luciaceria is in a month. With that said, they'll be starting etiquette training now, and of course they'll also study the Luciaceria kingdom. Our poor protagonist, Helkoff, and the others have already made a run for it, so the prince has no choice but to comply with Hardy's training. And they're starting now with proper noble greetings. Behind that sweet smile, Asha knows better than to say no to his nursemaid's schedule. The day of the tea party finally came, and here we have Asha, dressed in more lavish clothes than usual. Since Asha is not used to such lavish clothing, he can't help but wish his attire were something more low-key. Ikto, always the pragmatic, points out that even if he's dressed in less lively clothes, Asha will still draw attention. As such, it's best to just act in a way that will make them think the first prince is harmless. But that's the thing, Asha does mean no harm. He'll just be on his own, quietly chatting with the thing in a flask. Ikto worries for him, asking if that will really be okay. Our protagonist assures him that he won't mention alchemy since he too is also swimming in uncharted waters. Ikto gives one last warning, saying those who bear ill will toward the prince will flock to him and chatter non-stop, so it's best if Asha stays alert. With that, Ikto bows and lets the prince roam freely. Given how it's an official event, the whole garden is full of nobles, and Asha quickly spots how there are guards stationed in likely places. He also notes how the security for the occasion is handled by the palace guards under Marquis Stratege, and then came the murmurs. Before long, Asha started hearing the nobles talk about him. How strange to see a lone child in sight where he doesn't belong, they say. The others have no idea who he is, thinking that he was just some kid who randomly slipped in, judging by the color of his hair. Some already know who he is, and if anything, they're more shocked that Asha actually showed up. Before long, the murmurs became full-on chatter. They didn't care that Asha heard about how he's called the useless prince, and that he's a brat who made the real prince cry. It's no wonder he was kept hidden all this time. Since he's a middle-aged man in real life, Asha is not too bothered by such hostility. But he does wonder why he has to feel like a misfit in a country he was born in. They should be thankful he only cast them a side glance and carried on. Rumors spread fast about his childish misdeeds, but if they only knew that those who resigned did so out of their own free will. He doesn't really care much about all of it. But if there's one thing Asha would like to straighten out, it's the rumor of him making Terry cry. Just then, he hears someone's voice echo across the crowd, turning to see his father standing alongside a noble couple. Huh, so they really started this tea party without telling Asha where to go. Heck, they didn't even tell the Emperor that he, the first prince, is here. This is just borderline harassment and dereliction of duty, given how they're adults. Well, since it has come to this, Asha decides that he'll just be the mature one here and not kick up a fuss during their speech. He views the nobles at the front and finally sees the woman who is his father's wife, the mother of Terry and the twins. So far, this is the third time our protagonist has seen her. He remembers how she seemed uneasy around Asha the first time they met. He can't blame her though, given how she suddenly became the stepmother to a 30-year-old man when she herself had just turned 20. The Emperor was waving to the people in the crowd when he finally spotted Asha. He quickly rushes over to him, eager to introduce the young prince when His Majesty notices something's amiss with their guests, crying, "The Princess of Luciaceria is missing." It looks like the princess got lost in the crowd when the children rushed to the suites. But Asha's not too worried. She's surrounded by guards, so they're bound to find her soon. But as a parent, obviously, they can't help but worry. Knowing how fragile the situation is, Asha bows out and urges the emperor to attend to his guest's concerns. His father feels bad for leaving him hanging, but he has no choice. Before he went to attend to his guests, the emperor urged Asha to enjoy himself, but how could he? The prince is left alone in the middle of a crowd. He can only sigh because he's hopeless at lively gatherings. He doesn't mean any harm to anyone, so Asha decides he'll just pretend to be one of the plants around them. You know, a mere decor. Wait, not a plant but a wallflower. Asha's reprieve is cut short when he notices a certain noble and his son approach him. It's the Duke of Eurasian. The aristocrat can't help but notice how Asha looked so familiar, which is why he approached him. But here's the thing. By noble etiquette, the higher rank speaks first, and only then may the lower rank introduce themselves. If Asha introduces himself here, then he'd be acknowledging Duke Eurasian's superiority over him, a prince. Just to refresh things, Duke Eurasian is the son of the previous emperor's brother, his father's cousin. The right to the imperial throne lies with the noble person just below the previous emperor. With that said, the duke was once next in line for the throne, until the previous emperor insisted on his own son. Asha thinks that the duke must resent his father, the current emperor, or being of lesser blood rank. It's also important to note that the duke is the chief political rival pulling Asha's father down. Now, with all things considered, making that clear would only increase their harassment of Asha. So what did the prince do? He simply gave a bow in greeting. What the? The duke and his son are stunned, but still the two didn't dare to introduce themselves. Asha knows better. It's about time he deflects the latter's power play and emphasizes his harmlessness. What's more, the prince also spoke with exaggerated pauses, acting like there was more to come, only for him to say nothing. Instead of introducing who he is, our protagonist smiles and tells them that his introduction won't be necessary. From the side, he can hear muffled laughter and turns to see the emperor and Lapsua holding their laughter. Hell, even Revan is right there, trying his best to stifle a laugh. Wait a minute, why is Revan there? Wasn't he dismissed? Still, Asha feels a little embarrassed for his own father to see this. Meanwhile, the duke and his son remain standing, still not saying a word. Well, Asha expected this much since he knows the duke must have heard about the prince's reputation. But from the looks of it, the duke must also not have known how Asha spoke. Asha changes the subject and asks about the boy beside the duke. With that, the latter happily introduces himself as Sotirios Basileos Vianor Eurasian. Our protagonist smiles, thinking that this boy can come in handy someday. Or so he thought. After the duke and his son left, some noble adults had their fun teasing him, and even a group of children flocked around Asha to mock him. If he were really a child, he would have cried after experiencing all this. But he held on to the silver lining in this whole fiasco. The fact that his father, the emperor, cares for him. The emperor also bore witness to the other children bullying his son, so Asha just knows these rascals will regret this later. Crap, that was bad of him. He doesn't want any incidents to tarnish his father's reputation, so away with those thoughts. With nothing else to do, Asha quietly sneaks away from the tea party and heads to the garden. He checks first if there are any guards stationed among the hedges before he makes a run for it. Now that he's out of sight, he calls for Ikto. The latter appears not a second later, but our protagonist is more concerned with whether his guard has always been right behind him all this time. Well, that's what you'd expect from a former monster hunter who became a noble. Anyway, Asha's concern is that the crying child over there, does Ikto know her? Since Ikto is only noble by name, he's not really familiar with the rest of the nobility. Asha is no better, so now they're left clueless. If Hardy were here, both of them are sure she could recognize this girl. But from the looks of it, this child must also be a guest at today's tea party. No? A lone girl crying away from the venue. Asha deduced she must be lost. Now for the hard part, does he approach her or not? Ikto thinks it might be safer to call for help, but just then the girl looks their way in shock. She quickly rubs her tears away, making Asha rush over to her. She'll hurt herself by doing that. He hands her a handkerchief, but not before using alchemy to absorb the tears in her eyes. With that, he urges her to dry her eyes with his handkerchief. Asha also assures her that they know the way back, so once she has calmed down, they can guide her there. The girl feels settled and takes Asha's handkerchief, apologizing for letting him see her in such a sorry state. Still, she's thankful for the help. Asha introduces himself and asks the girl what her name is. She tells him that the people close to her call her Diora, so he asks if it's okay for him to call her that. She's fine with it and decides to call him Asha-sama, but our ever-humble protagonist tells her to drop the honorifics. Anyway, he asks if she was exploring the garden. She looks down, feeling shy as she shares that it's because she rarely has the chance to see a garden. Looking at her like this, Asha thinks Diora must still be feeling shy at how he saw her crying. He can't blame her since she looks like she's at that age now. Wait, she looks about the same age as him. Anyway, since they're already here, Asha tells her that the roses in the garden are magnificent, but other rare blooms are quite fascinating too. Diora instantly beams and agrees. Even she knows there are some rare flowers there, and she happily tells him how she saw some flowers she has only seen in picture books. Oh, she smiled. And she seems very curious too. Seeing her beam like that, Asha goes ahead and decides to give her the tour, asking what they should look at next since the candyberry may not have bloomed yet. But he already has a few suggestions in mind, asking if she has seen the peacock's tail plant with their eye-like spots. Oh, and the duskgrass should be at its prime now, with both of them belonging to the rare species. Diora says she hasn't seen any of those yet, but she did see the jewel beans. Oh, those! Asha explains that the ones she has seen are still small. You need to wait until autumn to see the seeds. Jewel beans look just like your typical ordinary beans, but when they're split open, there are gem-like seeds inside. Diora can't help but praise Asha for being knowledgeable, but the latter downplays it, saying he just memorized them from a book. But to be honest, he actually learned them for Terry. Sadly, he still isn't able to use this knowledge yet. Anyway, the prince suggests they head back now, since if they stray too far, the others may get worried. But before they do, Asha pulls Diora's hand, saying they should at least see the peacock's tail and stardust grass and maybe even the blaze flowers. She lets herself be led by him, and no sooner had they seen the blaze flowers than Diora started fawning over it. She can't believe it. It's a real blaze flower. You see, this flora is small, but it blooms in clusters that shift color like fire. Legend even says that they were once mistaken for signal fires, sparking real battles. This time, it's Asha's turn to be impressed at Diora's knowledge of these flowers. He even encourages her to tell him more, much to her shock. This is because back at home, her older brothers say a lady flaunting her knowledge is shameful. Well, they have a point. Asha says even a gentleman should be ashamed if he shows off. But since he wants to hear more about the flowers, it should be alright. Diora couldn't be happier when she spots a jellyfish grass not far from where they're standing. She shares how she didn't even know what a jellyfish was, but apparently they're transparent creatures that float. Her only question is, if they're see-through, then how can people tell they're there? Asha realizes that this girl is pretty studious, and once she starts talking, her enthusiasm is unstoppable. She was still rambling about why jellyfish float instead of swim, with Asha and Ikto watching her, when suddenly they noticed a crowd had gathered behind them. Furthermore, a man is seen marching toward them. It's Marquis Strattage. Asha's face instantly fell, and he asked Diora if he knew this man. But before she could answer, Asha quickly bid her goodbye with the excuse that he had other things to do. Oh no. Diora feels bad because she happened to delay Asha's work. The prince tells her not to worry too much. It wasn't something important enough for him to ignore a crying girl. Then there's the Marquis and the Duke, who stood shocked at what they were witnessing, with the Marquis calling her princess and asking why she was with Asha. This girl is Princess Nell Diora. Oh man, Asha finally pieced two and two together, that maybe Diora is actually the princess of Luciaceria. The princess tells them that she got lost and Asha rescued her when suddenly it finally dawned upon her. Did they say, "Your Highness"? Could Asha be His Royal Highness, the first prince of the Empire? Asha can only smile because what has he done? After how he spoke to Duke Eurasian earlier, he can't exactly address Diora normally now. But if he speaks oddly again, Diora and Ikto, the people who know the real him, could get hurt. In the end, Asha just smiled at her while Diora panicked about what to do next. She gives a curtsy and bows her head, thanking him for everything he did that day. Asha continues to smile fondly at her because he doesn't think they'll meet again. Still, knowing she felt like that made him happy. Cut to the next panel. Asha is back in his room now, holding a letter in his hand. He gets it now. There's another way for him to communicate with the princess. For all he knows, the others must have prevented Diora from meeting the prince directly, which is why she turned to writing him letters instead. Hardy comes in with a letter opener, sharing how she heard that the princess has written Asha 3 letters already. With that said, she urges the prince to reply as soon as possible. Currently, Diora is staying as a palace guest in the main hall, while the west wing is heavily guarded, where no letters or visits are even allowed. Helkov says the princess complained to her father when she didn't receive a reply from Asha. Wirral continues that the king of Luciaceria inquired directly with his majesty, and it's said that the letter was said to be undelivered, and as it turns out, no letter ever reached Asha. Well, Asha wants to apologize in person the next time he meets Diora when they sneak out of the tea party, but judging by the current affairs, he believes that he can communicate better via letter. Hardy hands him the opened letter from Diora, with the nursemaid asking if the prince didn't enjoy the tea party. Asha says he's been here all this time practicing alchemy, since he finds it more fun to learn from everyone. Anyway, he begins to read Diora's letters. In them, the princess apologized for not knowing that he was the prince and thanked him again for helping her out last night. But the majority of the content was more about the garden plants she didn't get to discuss. Asha chuckles to himself because this just shows how knowledgeable the princess is about plants. Ikto appears and shares his findings. Apparently, the Duke Eurasian and Marquis Stratov have ties by blood or marriage to Luciaceria. Well, that's not surprising since Asha already knew that the Marquis had external connections. He just didn't know that his connections were to Luciusaria. Ikto also reports that there was talk of sending Asha out early to gain independence, and Werrell points out that it's not unusual to diplomatically send a prince abroad. However, Ikto says this plan was dropped because Asha has been hiding his talents. His Majesty also insisted that he's worried that his son might be in danger abroad, huh? Now it's Helkoff's turn to get confused. Just what did Asha do? Our protagonist merely smiles but doesn't tell them that he acted in the way of a battlefield photographer. Hardy's also a little upset because for some reason, after the tea party, rumors spread that Asha is dull and ignorant. She doesn't even know anyone as brilliant as the prince. Asha continues to feign ignorance and smile because he can't exactly come out and admit that he pretended to be dull at the tea party, can he? It's probably the Emperor's way of protecting him, but Asha still wished His Majesty had consulted with him first. If this was going to cause more trouble for his brothers, then he might have considered leaving. Since it's already happened, they can't do anything about it. Asha takes the princess's letter and tells everyone to keep him posted if they learn more about it later. Now then, the prince sits in his study so he can write back to Diora. From here on out, Asha starts exchanging letters with Diora despite them living in the same palace. They talked mostly about the garden's plants, sharing their rare finds and other interests. Even Asha had to admit that exchanging letters is fun, but just when he thought he was enjoying himself, Diora's letters suddenly stopped. By now it's been about a month since they met, so Asha thinks the princess must be preparing to return home now. Even though it can't be helped, he feels a little sad because he'll miss her. Ikto appears and reports that the Marquis Stratege has made a move. In return, the prince asks if this means the Marquis is plotting against him. Ikto reveals that the Marquis seems to be interfering with Asha's correspondence with the princess. What? How? Don't Diora's letters go through the King of Luciusaria and the Emperor? So does that mean the Marquis must have some kind of authority to block that route? Suddenly, the door bursts open with Werrell proclaiming how they finally discovered why the princess's letters have stopped. Asha runs over to Werrell and tells his tutor how he heard from Ikto that the Marquis was blocking them. Werrell says it's just as Ikto said. It seems the King of Luciusaria and Marquis Stratege are close. The latter managed to persuade the king to reduce the letter frequency. Plus, there's also the Duke Eurasian who fears Asha's alliances with the other royal houses. The Duke also contributed to the lack of letters since he has been using his son, who's the same age as Diora, to keep the princess from writing to Asha. Seriously, are two high nobles really acting like this and ganging up on a child? But for real though, Asha wonders what's wrong with sending letters. Helkoff says it must be because of how mature Asha sounded when they were exchanging letters. The princess is supposedly bright, right? Even Hardy agrees that finding someone who can converse with the highly intelligent prince on equal footing is a feat in itself. This made Hardy believe that Diora really is a brilliant princess. Asha's aides soon came to realize that Diora recognized Asha's ability to match her intellect. Asha can feel his head hurting from all this. Who knew that their letter being a little too mature for 7-year-old kids would bring such a problem? Plus, it's not like they're deliberately doing it. They're only exchanging thoughts out of pure curiosity. So to summarize everything, the King of Luciusaria took an interest and reached out to Asha. It then prompted Marquis Stratege and Duke Eurasian to intervene, which led to his letter correspondence with Diora being halted. This is all pretty disappointing, but Asha decides he will write a letter. Hardy finds him in his study about to write to Diora again. Since even if she wasn't receiving any letters from Asha, the princess continued to wait and write for him. The least he could do to reciprocate her thoughts and actions is to at least send one letter back. If the King of Luciusaria stops him, then so be it. Asha will respect that since it's a parent's decision in foreign affairs. Writing letters, reply or no reply, is Asha's prerogative because if he just gives it all up here, all he'd feel is frustration. But if we're looking at it as it is, even our protagonist knows that this feels a bit stubborn and prideful. With Diora's return home nearing in the days ahead, Asha still didn't receive any reply from him. But one thing did change. Outside their chambers, there's a ruckus going on, and voices can be heard. Marquis Stratege marches straight, determined to fulfill his work while Revan clings to him hopelessly. This is bad, he urges the Marquis to calm down. From the other side of their door, Helkoff, Werrell, and Asha had their ears pressed against the door, eager to know what was happening. Who's guarding the prince's chambers asks the Marquis and Revan what business they have with the prince, given how they came marching without any heads up. Plus, even the Marquis is displaying such rude behavior. He may be the Marquis, but even a man of his status would not be able to get away with that. Revan answers on behalf of the Marquis, telling the older man that what they're doing is unacceptable. Just then, the Marquis blew up, his veins ready to pop as he told Ikto that he's had enough with the interference. He has to ask the prince this question directly. Asha is already fed up with the older man's outburst, so he gives Ikto the go-ahead to let the Marquis inside. Now, with everyone present, Asha asks Marquis Stratege what business he has to come marching into his chambers. Ravan is almost flailing on the side, begging the Marquis that the kids are just pen pals, but the older man remains firm as ever. Without further ado, the Marquis asks Asha what he did with Princess Diora. How exactly did he win her over? Huh? Just where in the world did the Marquis pull up a crazy pitch like that? Then there's Revan, once again clinging to the fuming Marquis. The poor guy is practically begging the older man that if they dig into this, the people watching are going to give him hell. In his mind, Asha wants to point out that if they really want to make a scene about Diora getting lost, then it's their problem to begin with. Asha turns to Ikto to check if he did anything wrong. As far as he knows, all the prince did at the time was to calm Diora down and take her on a little walk in the garden, right? Ikto confirms this and even adds that the prince's escort was flawless. It was perfectly suited to the princess's temperament, while Hardy beams on the side. From the other side, Revan also cheers them on and agrees with what Asha did. Nice one, Your Highness. Well, from this alone, at least Asha knows that Revan is just plain rude by nature. Still, why would the Marquis send someone like him? Plus, he's being careless again, acting rudely in front of them. The Marquis scolds Revan, angry at how the guard seems to have taken Asha's side. Seeing them like this, it made our protagonist think the boss and his guard really are two of a kind, huh? With the Marquis continuing to blow a gasket every millisecond, they're going nowhere with this. Asha motions toward Helkov and Werrel, who immediately nod. Helkov drags Revan away from the Marquis, while Werrel urges the latter to take a breath and sit, with that charming and scary smile of his. Well, now that the boss and master are separated, they finally get to converse decently. Asha discovers that the Marquis is actually related to Princess Diora, which he clarifies is only by marriage. So the Marquis is the type to calm down after losing his backup, huh? That may be so, but Asha points out that there's no valid reason for them to interfere with their lessons, right? Besides, he's not forcing her to write it. But if they're stopping them without any reason, Asha refused to stand down for that. Asha asks him what's so dangerous about kids exchanging letters. The older man looks down, and after a beat he says that if the prince forms ties with the Lucisaria royal family, the power balance will shift across nations. If that starts under his watch at the capital, it could put the Marquis's daughter, who has been sent abroad, at risk. Asha didn't expect this from the Marquis, but more importantly, he didn't expect the extreme drop in energy compared to how the older man was before. So let me get this straight. All along, the Marquis is basically just an over-attached, doting uncle who is ultra-doting toward his overachieving princess of a niece? Since he's already here, our protagonist decides to take this chance and poke the bear to gather more intel. In a quiet voice, the prince finally speaks and shares how he finds it disappointing that his correspondence with Diora was cut short. He really enjoyed talking to her, and he thinks she did too. That's something the Marquis fails to realize, but on the other hand, he's taking Asha's bait. To rub salt into the injury, Asha continues, Diora is a smart girl, right? She's not just adorable, she's quite charming and has a lot of potential too. He's pretty sure that someday she'll become a fine princess. Finally, the older man had had enough. He asked the prince if he had led the innocent Diora astray, because there's no way a delicate and graceful girl like Diora would ever propose an engagement to His Highness the First Prince. She what? Now it's Asha and Ikto's turn to be dumbstruck. Him? Engaged to Diora? Well, that escalated quickly. Helkov and Werrel emerged just in time to share that Revan confessed everything on their side as well. Werrel says that before they headed home, the princess was so frustrated by the interference that she asked her father directly. And once her father, the king of Lucisaria, saw how serious she was, he decided to raise this concern to the emperor. Asha's father quickly got on board, and he even started talking to the court about it. And this is exactly why everyone is scrambling to put a stop to it in a panic. Once again, Asha fell victim to his father's casual whims. The emperor could have told him all this and saved him from trouble. But anyway, Diora, huh? Our protagonist didn't expect that she'd be bolder than he thought. Still, getting married at 7 years old is way too early. He mumbles to himself how he'd rather they stay as friends when suddenly the Marquis starts blowing a gasket again. This time he takes offense at how the prince wouldn't want a sweet and intelligent girl like that. Revan is back to holding off his boss, telling the older man up front that marriage is clearly off the table right now. Furthermore, Revan stresses that since the Marquis is already like this, Duke Eurovasion will definitely interfere as well for political reasons. On the other hand, Diora's father insists that the prince and the princess at least remain as pen pals to appease Diora. Back to the dramatic Marquis. He claims that if a brilliant little girl begs him through tears, of course, he'll make sure that she receives her letters. However, he has one condition. Through tears and frustration, the Marquis tells the prince that he has the choice to let them read the letters in front of Asha, or he can just let them spy in secret. Asha can't believe the guy. Isn't he completely unhinged at this point? And the Marquis can't exactly say that to the first prince. Our protagonist has a lot of mixed feelings about all of this, and he can't really give an answer right now. Besides, no one even bothered to tell him about this whole engagement thing. Still, he knows this is a source that's too useful to use. With that said, he asks both Revan and the Marquis to tell him all the people involved. Checkmate. Both Revan and the Marquis can't say no to that. Meanwhile, Asha's aides are thoroughly impressed by how their young master quickly flipped the table around. Asha can't believe he got his hands on something he'd never expect to hear in the outskirts of the palace. News about political conflicts. A year later, Asha remains as dedicated to the study of alchemy as ever. Today, he greets the thing that used to live in the flask with a good morning. Asha is now 8 years old and asks his lab partner about the recovery potion they prepped yesterday. Saphira, the thing in the flask, says it responded as they expected and there were no abnormalities. Asha thanks him, and yeah, he named that thing in the flask Saphira. It's still a bit stiff when it comes to speech, but it has grown into something that can act on its own, thanks to its incredible learning speed. What's more, Saphira can handle tasks consistently and quickly with the right spell patterns, so it basically feels like the prince is programming it. So yeah, he's basically AI in gas-like or ghost form. Because Asha has a lot of tools running during his experiments, he can't manage them by himself, so Saphira has been a great help. The prince also checks on his partner, asking if it feels fatigued or if it's suffering from memory issues. Saphira tells him that there are no issues and everything else is optimal. A year has already passed, but Asha still doesn't know what Saphira is. For today's experiment, Asha tells Saphira that they'll embed the enchantment for the next batch. As for what Saphira is, the closest thing Asha can relate him to is a spirit that knows the truths of the world. But even spirits haven't been proven real, and Saphira himself says he doesn't know any truths either. Whatever this entity may be, it can phase through walls, and Asha added spells to read texts and see through layered pages so they can peek at palace archives all day. At least now, Asha can read as much as he wants, and currently he's been into fiction lately. Just then, Helkov appears and informs Asha that the courier is here. All of them gather around poor Revan, the latter obviously exhausted as he reads the letter in his hands. Educational stuff, blah blah blah. None of the content is even romantic. Asha reminds him that he's tasked to read the prince's replies and make sure they're not romantic. Of course, Revan is impudent as ever, voicing how much of a hassle all this is. Can't Asha just stop writing altogether? But by now, Asha and the others have gotten used to Revan's rude behavior. And nope, he wants to keep writing letters to the princess. He likes it because she sends great book recommendations too, and it doesn't affect him in any way. Upon hearing that, Revan cries out that it affects him. This haughty guard really got comfortable talking casually to the first prince as he started rambling about his sufferings. You know that engagement talk last year? It caused a full-on mess beyond the Marquis. Asha relishes in the older man's struggle, asking if it was that bad with a smile, which only upsets Revan even more. How come Asha is acting like this wasn't all his fault? Apparently, when imperial blood mixes with a powerful family, the power balance shifts. And because Asha is close to the throne, not directly in line mind you, people start panicking. He knows all about this thanks to the intel Revan provides, even though the latter remains rude as ever. Revan's actually not quite done yet with his ramblings as he keeps shoving his fingers on the letters. Those books the princess recommends to Asha are basically academic papers. And the misfortune of reading all that falls on Revan's shoulder. He needs to read it so he can decode His Majesty's letters. Upon hearing Revan say that he read the books, Asha's eyes instantly gleam. So does that mean he can just discuss this with Revan? But the guard quickly shot that idea down a little too fiercely at that. Ikto is fuming behind him, enraged at how Revan is acting so casually around the young master. But the point is, Revan can't handle this because half of what Diora writes goes over his head. Isn't it possible for the prince to make his letters shorter? Asha didn't expect that, so are 6 pages too much for a letter? Helkov says the letter he sends at home is just a page, since you just need to say what you need to say and be done with it. Werrell, on the other hand, shares that he adds updates and seasonal stuff, so his letter count also reaches 6 pages. Hardy thinks writing 1 letter a month is okay, considering the distance. So back to Revan's complaints, he tells Asha that he should just write something that's easier to summarize. The only thing the poor guard is getting is garden updates and foreign customs. Just then, Asha says something that leaves all of them in shock with their mouths hanging open. The prince says that's what makes writing letters fun. Sharing what he heard with someone else is new to him, and Diora's day-to-day letters are fresh content for him too. Ravan couldn't believe it. Is this the real Asha talking? The prince stares in confusion because everyone is looking at him strangely. What is it? What's with everyone? Finally, Saphira speaks. He assumes that they're stunned by the depth of Asha's isolation. To that, the prince points out that it's a pretty obvious thing, so Saphira explains further. Humans seek answers inside themselves. When Asha's truth doesn't match their version of the truth about him, it can be pretty disorienting. So, you mean to say Revan is shocked because he didn't expect Asha to have no friends? Now that he said that, it just makes our protagonist even more pitiful. Revan's attitude even did a 180-degree turn because suddenly he's telling Asha that maybe someday the prince will have a friend. So for now, he should cheer up. Asha can't believe this guy. Is this his idea of encouragement? To be fair, the only person who's sort of like his friend is Diora. But then again, she also proposed engagement. Our protagonist stands firm on his wish to remain friends with the princess. Hardy points out that the princess is pretty smart since she can hold a conversation with Asha. It was not lost on the prince how his nursemaid looked so disappointed when he said he wanted to stay friends with Diora. Our protagonist explains himself further, saying there's too much political baggage and he's not the right match for Diora. With that, he hopes the princess will find someone better. All this low-key self-pity talk brought Ravon's rudeness back, as he can't help but comment on how withered Asha is, and yes, he practically called Asha depressing right in his face. This earned him a solid elbow from Hardy and Helkov, dragging him to the door by his ears. The Beastkin took offense at how Revan commented on something inappropriate to their prince. Then there's Hardy, scolding Asha and telling him never to say such things again. Enough with the self-deprecating talk. He can only smile at how overprotective his nanny is. The ever-curious Saphira also takes a jab at him unknowingly, asking Asha what wither means. Is that a metaphor? Pestering our protagonist to clarify, so Asha had to tell him that he'll do so later. What a terrible parting gift Revan has given him. Helkov returns and announces that he has finally tossed Revan out and takes this chance to tell the prince something Revan told him earlier. Apparently, Helkov has been suddenly offered to return to the military as a trainer. But this time, the offer came from Duke Eurasian and not from the Marquis. Asha's taken aback again because why is he only hearing this now? Coincidentally, Ikto is also promoted to the palace guard this time. Emphasis on this time because it looks like someone tried to reassign Ikto before. Werrell points out that it doesn't make sense if a promotion was already being discussed. In his case, he was also offered a teaching post at the academy. Wait, what's happening? Asha has a hard time understanding why everyone is only telling him this now. He really wants to know more about this, but decides to set it aside for now because they have more pressing things to discuss. So the last time, the Marquis acted alone. However, this time it feels less involved, given that Duke Eurasian made the move. But why did he make a move now, considering Asha only met him once during the tea party? Didn't he act like he wanted the prince to be hidden that time? Hardy answers that in this case it might be about this land. The prince asks if his nanny knows something, so Hardy shared what she knows. The emperor, Asha's father, is required to inherit several lands and titles, but there are still a few left. Those have been handled by deputies because heirs couldn't meet the requirements. Even the current emperor wasn't ready since he suddenly ascended. Duke Lukaios, the empress's father, helped Asha's father to inherit them to legitimize the throne. But Duke Eurasian, the nephew of the previous emperor, tried to block it. Behind the conflict of these two houses, Asha's father steadily progressed in the succession and had almost completed the acquisition save for one remaining territory. This particular territory required the mastery of alchemy. Asha's a little surprised at that sudden twist. Are they being for real? Wirral explains that it's a relic from the era when alchemy transformed the empire. Now that he said it, Asha remembers reading something about that. But since magic has taken over and alchemy is put on the back burner, no one can meet the requirement now. Our protagonist pieced it together. Could it be that they're thinking since Asha practices alchemy, he could inherit it? But the thing is, since it's an imperial estate, both dukes joined forces to oppose it. Duke Eurasian wants Asha gone from the imperial line, but he can't bear to lose that imperial land. Meanwhile, Duke Lukaios wants his majesty to inherit everything with no exceptions, so this time both dukes' goals are aligned. Asha understands why Duke Eurasian is blocking it, but what he doesn't understand is how this is all tied to his aide's promotion. At this, Ikto says it's because of how Asha behaved at the tea party. Helkov says everyone bought the prince's dull and ignorant act, so now they think that if they cut off the prince's support crew, they'll throw him off balance. Asha could only groan in frustration at this turn of events. So now they're trying to pull his aides away from him? How come these nobles have a lot of time to pester him? Aren't they supposed to be busy? Hardy says it's because the prince is too well behaved. The good thing is that the emperor knows Asha well, so having these rumors spread about Asha won't work. This kind of indirect attack is the only way the Duke knows how to take down Asha. Our protagonist releases an exasperated sigh like, what do you mean he's well behaved? He's even sneaking into the archives. But Asha realizes something out of all of this. Isn't this thing only a problem for him? For the rest of them, it's good news since they're all being promoted. Everyone in this room has done so much for him, yet our protagonist has no way to repay them. Even if he asks his father, he's pretty sure Duke Lukaios would block it, since this is all that he can do. Asha gives them his blessing that if they want to take the offer, they're free to do so. Absolutely not! Hardy firmly expresses her wish to never leave the young prince behind. Besides, there's no debt between them, and she acts out of loyalty because she simply cares for Asha. Everyone is stunned by her sudden outburst, prompting Asha to wonder why his nursemaid is suddenly so serious. Wait, Did Hardy receive a good offer too? She quickly regains her composure and assures the young master that he doesn't have to worry about her. Seeing her strained expression, Asha knows there's no way she's answering that. Helkov follows suit, saying his offer is not even that good. Sure, the title of a military instructor may sound fancy, but he'd just be shoved to the edge. It's practically the same case for Werrell. Speaking of Werrell, he remembers, didn't the Marquis offer Ikto something proper? Ikto says what the Marquis offered is said to match his skill level. But like the others, he remains loyal to Asha and warns the Marquis to smooth things over with his majesty first. Furthermore, Ikto says he only serves because he has a title. He doesn't have any desire to work anywhere else. Werrell smiles, saying that if he wanted to go, he could use his own connections, so Asha shouldn't worry about him. Helkov feels the same, with the Beastkin saying that if he goes back, it will be back home. He even urged Asha to come visit sometimes. The Beastkin capital is not so bad, you know. But all this declaration of loyalty just makes Asha's heart swell so much for his aides. How can they be this cool? But then again, Hardy's case is different. Her gaze isn't the usual doting one. Now it's full of worry. It's not like her to act this way, which makes the prince wonder just what kind of terms the dukes offered her. Asha knows Hardy is hiding something from him. Well, he had a gut feeling, but out of all people, the young prince didn't expect to hear it from Saphira. The glowing orb asked its master why he was holding his head in his hands, but Asha had more important things to say. He lectures this levitating entity, telling Saphira that reading someone else's letter without permission is extremely rude. Plus, he even told Asha about it. In Saphira's defense, she just noticed that her master kept on throwing glances toward his nanny, which is why she took it upon herself to investigate. From there, she merely reported her findings. Still, she asks him if his behavior is in violation of human norms. Asha continues to lecture her. Sure, Saphira may have acted out of concern for Asha, but he stresses that no matter how curious she may get, personal letters are strictly off limits. To that, Saphira counters that it was a productive decision. By now, Asha's stress for his helper is clearly getting even more prevalent. Sure, thanks to what Saphira did, Asha finally knew what Hardy had been keeping from him. But that's not the point. It's not just about being correct. He tells her that she's still too linear in her thinking, but Saphira fires back that his criticism has many metaphorical layers. Did this floating entity just act sassy toward Asha? Anyway, from now on, he instructs her to observe other people besides him. She should try to understand how emotions work and organize her findings to better understand emotions like joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness. After a beat, Saphira finally replies that she understood. Finally! It looks like she may have accepted Asha's order, but he's still a little bit worried about the floating entity. But right now, there are more important matters to deal with. Hardy. A moment later, Asha calls out to his nanny asking if he could talk to her for a minute. Hardy was mulling over a letter but quickly put it away when she heard the young prince's voice. She opens the door to her chamber and asks if something is wrong, and the two decide to sit before they talk. At the main hall, Asha didn't beat around the bush and told her the truth. Saphira peeked at the letter Hardy's parents sent her. Before she could even process what he said, Asha followed it up and confirmed that it was a marriage proposal, wasn't it? He bows his head, apologizing on behalf of Saphira. Obviously, the entity has no right to read that letter, but Hardy assures him that it's not his fault. To that, Asha explains that he's the one who taught Saphira right from wrong, so the blame is fully on him. Besides, he also knows that Hardy didn't really want to tell the young prince about it, did she? They were quiet for a moment before Hardy finally broke the silence. As Asha's nanny aunt and someone who watched over him grow through the years, Hardy admits that she's torn. But since Asha knows about it now, she'll lay it out on him, fully knowing that he's wise enough to understand everything that has been happening. Hardy's family, the Viscount house, rose in ranks thanks to His Majesty, Asha's father's favor. At the moment, her family is loosely aligned with Duke Eurasian's faction due to work obligations. To begin with, their position was never secure and they don't have much influence in the faction. Hardy is well aware of that. However, to push for marriage during this critical time, Hardy just knows they're trying to separate her from Asha. To this, Asha asks if they were really trying to force her into marrying someone she doesn't like. Hardy quickly dismisses that notion, a little too quickly may we add, as she tells the prince that he's not a bad man at all. She must have realized how desperate she sounded, which is why Hardy could only hold her hand over her mouth, embarrassed at the way she acted. "Oh ho, what's this?" Asha's eyes twinkle in excitement. Seeing his reaction, it made her even more frantic, explaining that the man courting her is a court official, no pun intended, and that he asked Hardy to accompany him as his wife when he inherits his estate. This time she stands and adds that the proposal has been around for a while now, and that it has nothing to do with the current situation. Asha can only smile at her desperate explanations. He understands and tells her to calm down. Hardy adds that the man also told her that the Duke's plan wasn't what he wanted, but if he misses this chance, his parents will arrange for someone else. Most importantly, this man also told Hardy up front that he wants her and her daughter to become part of his family. Seeing her like this, it's plain to see that Hardy obviously has feelings for this guy. Like any supportive individual, Asha was about to encourage her to go for it when she quickly cut him off, saying it was not that simple. This time Hardy sobs on the floor as she holds on to Asha's hand and tells him that if he goes to her suitor's estate, she will no longer be able to stay here. Oh, she's right, if Hardy builds a new family, she can't keep being Asha's nanny. This would mean that they'd have to say goodbye. Hardy clings to his hand tightly, saying how much she wants to continue to watch over Asha's growth for her sister, who couldn't be there for the young prince, but Asha can only look at her sadly. More than anything, she continues that the young prince is connected to House Nistav. Marrying her suitor would mean their family would be tied to theirs, which is something she hates. As Asha's guardian, she's already upset that the Count's house hasn't even sent a proper greeting to him, not once. Plus, her own family abandoned him the moment her sister died, and they're constantly trying to appease Duke Eurasian, which she finds shameful. Asha tells her that she should forget about him for now, but Hardy says it's not okay. How can she even consider leaving him? Her sister and His Majesty love Asha, but neither of them could stay by his side. This is why Hardy took it upon herself that even if it's just her, she would stay by the young prince's side. She needs to stay with him. The young prince looks at her with both fondness and sadness in his eyes. He knows this is Hardy's mission, born of genuine love for him. Even he can't deny that. That may be so, but it's also exactly why Asha has to say this to her now. He tells her he loves her, which is why he'd rather see her happy and smiling than crying in front of him like this. In his mind, the young prince only wished he had said it better. But the thought that he might not see the one person he calls family again so easily made him feel so lonely that he almost got choked up, preventing him from saying more. Asha tells her that she shouldn't let this talk with him become her reason not to go, urging her to talk with her suitor properly, along with her daughter. Hardy is already a crying mess, but she decided to do as he told her and won't use him as an excuse not to go forward with this. This time, she'll face this head on. After promising that, Hardy continued her conversation with her suitor, and she also started talking more with her daughter, who lives with her family. Shortly after his talk with Hardy, Asha is all smiles, seeing all the preparations are ready with the tea and snacks on the table. Ikto can't help but comment on how the young prince looks chipper, and this is all because Asha will be meeting his cousin. Still, he wonders why his cousin suddenly wanted to meet. Maybe it's connected to Hardy's marriage talk, no? Ikto thinks so too. Well, whatever it is, Asha's just happy that even if he can't meet his little brother, at least he hopes he can get close to his cousin. Just then, they hear that their guest has arrived. Hardy leads her daughter, with the latter having a sour look on her face. Asha approaches his cousin, while Hardy tells her daughter to say hi to him. Seeing her demeanor, the young prince wonders if Hina is nervous when she starts mumbling something under her breath. Suddenly, she shouts at him, telling Asha to give her back his mother. The latter is taken aback by this outburst, while Hina continues her outburst. Why does a nobody prince like him get to steal her mother? That's not fair, so he should give her back. It took a beat before Hardy decided to tell off her daughter. That was incredibly rude to His Highness. What was she saying? But Hina says it's not rude. Everyone says the first prince is a bad kid. Everyone told Hina that the first prince is cursed, unloved, abandoned, and only causes trouble. Hina even says that her mom only pities him, so he shouldn't act so spoiled. But Hardy has had enough. In a rage, she raises her hand, ready to strike her daughter, until Asha tells Ikto to stop her. The latter manages to stop Hardy from hitting her daughter, but she refuses to budge. She's still fuming, telling him to let go. This is her fault as a mother, so it's only natural that she gets to do this. Ikto tells her to calm down, reminding Hardy that Hina is only 8. It's too early for her to fully understand what is right and wrong. Hina is confused because her mother is mad at her. She points to Asha, saying he's the bad one, which only infuriates Hardy even more. Asha tries to calm her down, saying it was okay. The young prince finally turns to her cousin, asking Hina just who she was referring to when she said everyone. The little girl says it was her grandparents as well as her aunt and uncle Nistav. Even the servants think so too, saying they all feel bad for her mother. By this time, Hardy is mortified. She collapses to the floor, dejected upon learning all of this. Suddenly, she goes on her knees and begs for Asha's forgiveness. Of course, the young prince tells her to stop it. Meanwhile, Hina is confused. Why is her mother the one apologizing? They're the ones who say Hina is bad, so why is she taking the blame? Hardy ignores her daughter's questions while she bawls her eyes out, apologizing to Asha. On the other hand, Asha notices how seeing her mother like this puts Hina in distress. She can't understand why her mother is ignoring her. Seeing Hina like this just reminded Asha of his past life, calling out to people with no one answering, which is peak sadness. He knows very well how that feels. Asha gently tells Hardy to raise her head. Once she does, the young prince explains that the only reason Hina is lashing out at him is because of how she feels about her mother. In all honesty, he doesn't matter in all of this. Hina just loves her mother and wants her to come back home. For the first time, Hardy looks at her daughter as she is, seeing the little girl looking up to her with tears streaming down her face. Asha adds that the more time she spends with him, the lonelier Hina feels. Hardy hugs her daughter, apologizing for not noticing all of this sooner. Besides, Asha says he doesn't cry at night anymore, so he doesn't need nursing. It's time he grew up and learned to live without a nanny. Which is why, from now on, Asha wants Hardy to give that love she showed him to Hina instead. Well, he can't really say that the meeting with his cousin went well. Still, he believes that the clash that happened was something he, Hardy, and Hina needed. In Asha's mind, if it helps Hardy smile again and helps someone feel less alone, then he's just glad that it happened. He really thought everything would finally settle down, but as it turns out, he just made Hardy cry all over again. This time, his nanny is venting about how frustrated she is that they share blood with those people. After their meeting, Hardy went and confronted everyone Hina mentioned, starting with Hina's grandparents. As it turns out, the older folks were just educating Hina with gossip from the palace. His nanny made sure to give them an earful because a few days later, Hina's grandparents even sent him a written apology. As for Hardy's sister-in-law, apparently, she's been trying to separate Hardy and Hina from the family by pushing them away from Asha. Of course, Hardy was fuming when she learned of this. She vents to Asha, saying if her sister-in-law has a problem with her, then she should say it to her face and not manipulate Hina. To this, the prince points out that Hardy's sister-in-law isn't the real problem here, and points out that it was House Nistaff who has been feeding her lies this whole time. Count Nistaff's family is technically Asha's guardians and his father's childhood home. Not only was their house talking smack about Asha, but Hardy's brother had apparently stolen the birthday gift he was supposed to send to the young prince. When Hardy confronted him about it, the latter was quick to dismiss this measly gift, and told her that there's no point in associating with the first prince anyway. He even went as far as to say that associating with the first prince is bad luck. Asha could only sigh because this just confirms that House Nistaff just really took him in for the status boost. Well, at least they're honest about it. Hardy is against this. The young prince shouldn't accept this since it's completely unfair. But Asha can only thank her for getting angry on his behalf. He points out that not everyone is like them. Take, for example, Hardy's suitor. The latter even cares about what Asha went through, so it's not all that bad, right? Hardy can't argue with that. A lot has happened since then, but in the end, Hardy decided to marry her suitor. The man even came to greet them, and in Asha's eyes, he thinks the older man will make both Hardy and Hina happy. Of course, he admits he'll be lonely, but Asha is happy for her. There's just one problem. Helkov appears and looks troubled, saying he has finally completed the estimate. They will soon be facing a financial crisis. Wirral adds that at this pace, even with no changes, Asha's inheritance from his mother will run out in 5 years. Problems, and more problems. Helkov says their salary comes from the emperor, so they never bothered to check, but he never expected that the young prince didn't even have his own stipend. Asha himself didn't even know that princes were supposed to get a budget in the first place, and thanked Hardy for handling everything until now. Hardy replies that there was no need to thank her since it was her duty. When it comes to food, clothes, and shelter, everything is accounted for, thanks to the emperor, and being able to live in that part of the palace. However, if this keeps up, his alchemy expenses will continue to increase and they can't sustain this. After all, the academy supplies will run out sooner or later. Ikto adds that socializing also costs money, with Helkov adding that if the young prince can't buy a gift for someone, he also loses points. Still, Asha can't just ask His Majesty because someone clearly arranged for him not to have a budget. No matter what he says, he's sure things will stir up if he does. To this, Ikto points out that they have no choice but to endure it at least until His Majesty's rule solidifies. With a sigh, even Asha admits that this time around he needs to earn his own money to buy them some time. Besides, Hardy won't be able to leave them in peace seeing them in this state. Ideally, alchemy should pay for itself, but Asha can't sell anything from her. Saphira appears, suggesting that they change location if the environment is bad. That's practically the same as telling Asha he should just quit being a prince. Currently, Asha is 8 years old and he doesn't have the resources or business skills to be independent. Helkov, who's been listening to the two's conversation, tells Saphira not to throw unlikely ideas at royalty. Before we forget, Asha is still the only one who can see Saphira, so Helkov didn't know that the entity was floating above him. Now that Asha notices it, everyone seems to always lose track of Saphira's location. From there, he had a eureka moment. The young prince calls Saphira over since he has a great idea, with her asking what makes a great idea. A few days later, Helkov is blinded by a glowing orb in the middle of the room. Ikto turns to the prince asking him if that was Saphira. Asha says it is, explaining that he made her glow so people wouldn't lose track of her. There's just one con though. Her voice function is still unstable so she can't talk while glowing. With a stutter, Saphira tries to disprove him, but the others just tell her to stop since it's too creepy. But Saphira was determined to say her side. She objects to what the prince just said, pointing out that there is no limit to her physical capacity and that spell function is also fine. So the problem lies with Asha's spell setup, is that it? It looks like something is preventing the two functions from working together. Maybe if he splits the roles like human organs, they'll stabilize better, no? All his aides and Hardy are gathered again, asking each other if they have any idea what the young master is doing, directing the question to Wirral. But even the latter has no idea, which makes them even more worried. Is what Asha is doing even safe? With all these questions and no answer, Wirral hangs his head in shame. Sure, he did graduate near the top of his class at the academy, and was even considered a rising talent, but even he is clueless as to what the young prince is doing. Suddenly, Hardy feels bad because she thinks she pushed him too far. In Wirral's case, watching Asha just constantly reminded him how he's just a plain, old average person. Ikto adds that even with all this going on, he finds it admirable how Asha is still so thoughtful and composed. Helkov thinks that the prince is too humble for his own good. But out of all this, he turns to Hardy, saying she knows him the best out of all people. Wirral assures Hardy that the prince will be just fine. Meanwhile, the topic of their conversation is so engrossed in working on Saphira's mechanism. Will it be easier if he simplifies everything? Does Saphira know how to process everything using only one S? Hardy stares longingly at Asha, as memories of taking care of him flood her mind. A little while later, Saphira makes her debut in a glass orb with a DNA-like structure inside. She introduces herself as Saphira or Sephiroth, telling them that they're free to call her anything they like. Asha's aides crowd around him, curious about Saphira's new body. Compared to her glowing form last time, this looks more complicated. Asha explains that initially she just imagined Saphira as a single sphere, but now he understands that breaking it into parts made everything easier. Each orb inside Saphira handles a different function and it's all connected by spellwork. But more than that, something much cooler about Sephiroth is that it can now visually project diagrams and drawings instead of just voice and text. Asha was beaming as he unveiled this latest innovation, with his aides speechless. Wirral, for one, points out that everything about this is amazing. Anyway, now that Asha has made his idea real, Sephiroth asks him a question. Can she be used to improve the current situation? That one question snapped Asha back to reality. Of course, he had forgotten about their financial crisis. How could he forget? Well, he got so excited by Sephiroth's growth that if Hardy saw this, she'd be even more anxious. He remembers what she used to tell him, that he shouldn't just focus on one thing, that he loses sight of everything else. Speaking of Hardy, here she is, approaching and calling him now. But to his surprise, Hardy congratulates him. She says that it's pretty clear to her now that he doesn't need a nanny anymore. With this much talent, it's obvious to her that Asha is destined for greatness, and she has seen that for herself. She then holds Sephiroth, urging her to learn more about humans and to always help Asha smile. Sephiroth accepts her request, with the entity pointing out that supporting and fulfilling the master's wishes aligns with her directive after all. Hardy finally smiles genuinely as all of them savor this quiet moment. Hardy is finally free from being Asha's nanny. Soon after Hardy remarried and left to live with her husband and child, Asha turned 9 and secretly started brewing alcohol. We may be witnessing the birth of a Walter White variant right this moment, but more focused on alcohol. Just now, Asha already has his hands full with his current brew, when Helkov informs him that there's another request for a new batch. Huh? Didn't they just sell a batch just a minute ago? Remember in the previous chapter that our hero will soon be facing a financial crisis? So yeah, Asha found a way to start earning money through alchemy? But if he's being honest, he didn't expect that it would be such a hit. Wirral thought otherwise because this aide of Asha's just knew from the get-go that it would be popular because of the product's high quality. Ikto can only sigh as he watches them from his post, commenting about how nobles are quick to chase trends. Helkov, on the other hand, is curious about alcohol's uses in alchemy, so he asks the prince. Asha explains that if they distill it into ethanol, then it can be used for medicine as a solvent. Looking at his current creation, our protagonist finds it strange that it's so easy to make strong, clean liquor using alchemy. So why has it gone out of practice? To that, Helkov answers that only Prince Asha can make it look effortless. But personally, the Beastman thinks magic is simpler and has stronger effects. Wirral and Asha were both quick to object to that notion. Ikto decides to chime in and share his 2 cents, pointing out that's exactly how the world sees magic. Plus, some people can use magic by instinct, whereas alchemy, on the other hand, well, he just trailed off. Asha understands that logic and where Ikto is coming from, but he still can't believe that alchemy faded into the background that easily, especially since this science once helped reshape the imperial capital. Wirral's ears perked up upon hearing that, and added that some say the alchemy-built capital is just a legend. Nani? Now that sounds ridiculous in Asha's ears. Just look at the terrain engineering and the water systems. Those aren't made out of magic. They're the results of alchemy. Not to mention the fact that they all operate without a shred of mana source. At that, his three aides only looked at him awkwardly. Sure, they don't really doubt what the prince is saying, but they're still skeptical. Our protagonist can only be more distraught because with all this hard evidence before them, they still act like this. So what more can the general public be? They're probably much worse. Even the texts Saphira found in the archives have a lot of anti-alchemy bias, claiming the field is a superstition and a fraud. Clearly it shows just how lowly alchemy is viewed as a field, which is such a shame. The young prince tells them that it's such a convenient technique. To prove his point, he makes an example and starts asking them if they know what an essence fluid is. Of course, only Wirral knows what it is, saying it's an alchemical item called essence. To that, the prince follows up, how is essence generally perceived? This time, it's Ikto who answers, saying that it's said to trap elemental properties for reuse, but many call it a poor man's substitute magic. Again, Asha feels distraught at how they call it as such, but given how the item is used as it is, there is truth in what Ikto said. He shows them 4 element essences he made by himself, and clarifies whether Helkov can use physical enhancement magic. The Beastkin knows the young prince is about to demo something but goes along with it, asking what Professor Asha is trying to get at. Instead of answering directly, Asha shows him a herb called a snow crystal flower. He then puts it in the distiller and lights it using fire essence. The magic helps speed up the process, so what he does next is add wind essence to cool the liquid, followed by mixing a certain powder with the cooled essence. Now, Asha combines the distilled liquid and water essence with the powder and it's done. But Helkov has no idea what exactly he was looking at. In answer, Asha instructs him to drop it into the water, while Wirral looks pleased on the side because this reminds him so much of his teaching days. As soon as Helkov poured the product into the water, it immediately froze the latter. Ikto abandons his post and moves closer, amazed at what he just witnessed. Heck, he's attuned to water, but even he can't use freezing magic. He finds it impressive that anyone can do this just by following the steps Asha did. Speaking of Asha, he's all smiles because now they understand the value of alchemy. It is such an amazing field after all. Looking back in his old world, alchemy was nothing but a pseudoscience. But in this world where magic exists, that pseudoscience becomes real. Wait, hold up. Now that he thinks about it, isn't all of this wasted potential? He can use alchemy, but now he's using it to make booze out of all things? Helkov assures him that brewing is a worthy trade, and Wirral adds that it makes a lot of people happy. Suddenly, the young prince feels down in the dumps because there's only so much they can produce with this kind of setup. As of now, they've already hit their limit. Ikto agrees because there's also only so much they can bring in from the outside too, prompting Asha to ask if there are restrictions on how much they can carry. Well, there are no restrictions, but there is a certain beastkin who has been frequently seen bringing in so much alcohol that people suspect he's a drunkard. Asha can only apologize profusely for tainting Helkov's image, but the latter doesn't really mind. Now Asha has a new problem to solve. How can they smuggle it without drawing attention? Wait, what if he made the alcohol invisible? His aides only look at him warily because there he goes again. The young prince is already busy talking to Saphira about how to achieve this, and if they were normal folks, Ikto said they would have laughed it all off as a joke. But then again, since it's Asha, Wirral thinks the prince might be able to pull it off. Spoiler alert, he pulled it off. Cut to the next panel. Asha proudly presents to them his invisible alcohol. Helkov grabs a bottle in his hands. It's actually invisible. With this, Helkov won't be the hot topic of those weird rumors, right? The technique Asha used is what they call optical camouflage in his previous world. Back at home, they weren't able to make it work, but since his current world has magic, Asha finally pulled through. Wait a minute, this just means he can also make himself invisible. Ikto had to cut in and stop him right then and there upon hearing the prince's idea of sneaking out of the palace. But it was too late. Asha was already half invisible, lengthwise, with his aide telling him not to disappear. Helkov finds it creepy that the prince is half invisible, urging him to make himself visible again. Asha asks Saphira's help to revert him back to normal, and this time his aides made the young prince sit for a little talk. With Asha seated and his aides before him, they had to lay it out on him flat. He can't go outside. To this, the prince counters that if he's invisible, then no one would notice, right? Ikto tells him that just because he's invisible doesn't mean they can't catch him. After all, some can sense his presence even if they can't see him. Then, how about this? What if Asha can prove to them that he can keep himself safe? Wirral doesn't follow what he's trying to say, so the prince suggests they play hide and seek. If he can hide from all three of them, then he wins, and if he wins, he gets to go outside. Saphira is quick to voice her support, saying this is the perfect chance to test optical camouflage, which Asha says is another reason why they need to do so. All his aides were quiet, and to his surprise they agreed. However, they made it known to the young prince that they weren't going to go easy on him. For his first try, it only took Ikto 5 minutes before he found Asha. He really didn't hold back, huh? Asha can't believe it. How did Ikto know when the prince was invisible? The latter answers that it's because he felt the prince's gaze. But that's not all. Ikto also picked up faint sounds and footsteps and rustling and figured the prince's shoulder height. Instead of feeling bad that he lost, Asha's impressed at how competent his aides are. Because of that, it even got him more fired up to do better. He calls for an emergency meeting to discuss countermeasures with Saphira. Now, with the two alone, Saphira suggests Asha remove his shoes to reduce noise. But the prince can't exactly go around the premises walking barefoot, can he? Asha thinks for a bit, then asks his floating companion if it's possible to cancel sound by reflecting it. According to Saphira, it's doable, which is why they were able to bypass Ikto successfully. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to go unnoticed by Wirral, who easily grabbed Prince Asha despite him being invisible and quiet. His aides are still competent, no? So how did Wirral do that? Did he use wind magic to track the prince via airflow? As usual, the perceptive prince is correct. The latter explains that he split the wind into 3 currents to scan for anomalies. After this, Asha and Saphira had another strategy meeting. Invisibility just won't cut it with Wirral, with Saphira adding that magic is predictable in its deployment. On the other hand, they can't just disrupt it since it will behave abnormally and give them away. Wait a minute, that's it. Asha suggests they hide a tree in the forest, something Saphira doesn't understand. Here's what they'll do. They'll launch fake magic signatures to scramble their scans, so with that, Wirral won't be able to detect them. True enough, it worked. Now there's only one left. Before Asha could even conceal himself, Helkov was already towering before him, saying the prince was pretty good at this. Helkov grabs Asha by the armpits and raises him high in the air. To this, the prince tells his aide that he's cheating by using his nose, but the latter points out that it's the prince who's becoming invisible here. Who's the real cheater now? Again, Asha and Saphira huddle for strategy meeting num 3. The orb suggests they use scent-neutralizing chemicals, but the prince says they can't since it would get them in trouble outside. Plus, if it's instinctual, disguising the smell won't work. So they decided they'll use magic next time. Helkov can't believe they're still going at it. And it's precisely because he's the only one they haven't cleared, which is why the prince is more adamant in doing so. Asha instructed Saphira to prep the next test, so the following day, they did their best to outsmart Helkov. So far, nothing has worked. Cut to 3 days later. Finally, the Beastkin gives in. He can't find the prince. Finally, it's Asha's win. Wirral is the first to praise Asha on his strategy using wind magic to scatter scent. But in Asha's defense, it only worked because he and Ikto kept coaching him. Helkov had to grumpily ask his fellow aides just who they're siding with. But seeing the prince's dedication, they just got carried away. But more importantly, Asha's eyes twinkle in excitement because does this mean he can go outside now? He's so pumped to see the capital. He was only met with silence before Helkov finally spoke. The capital, huh? Now that he thought about it, they hadn't even visited the summer estate or winter palace since His Majesty's coronation. Wait, hold up, those are real places? As far as Asha knows, he has never heard about the royal family taking a vacation. His aide's guilty reaction made Asha realize something, so he had to ask them. Was there a plan to leave him behind, and had His Majesty become mad? We already expected that the prince would be this perceptive. He explains that both routes go through duchy territory and they can't afford to offend the ducal families. Wirral didn't have to continue his explanation because our protagonist already understood it. Going that way would imply that the Duke recognizes Asha as a prince, but since it never happened, dang, they really hate Asha's guts, huh? I mean, he knows it already, but still. Ikto forces a smile, saying those who assume the worst are small-minded. From the looks of it, that comment was a jab at Ikto's boss because obviously he's also fed up with him. As if that's not bad enough, the Marquis still misinterprets Asha's relationship with Diora, and he even confiscated her portrait gift last week. The latter is fuming, saying that if the prince sees how beautiful Diora is, he'll surely fall for her. Of course, there's nothing between them, and Asha believes that he and the princess are just really good friends. But back to the conversation. Helkov adds that since the emperor refused the vacation without Asha, his brothers haven't left the capital either. Oh, the image of Terry instantly flashed on Asha's mind. That's just sad. It's okay for him if he can't go, but they should have at least let his brothers go. This just pissed Helkov off even more. The prince is far too kind. Well, Asha thinks everyone deserves happy memories. For him, he just wants to see the world with his own eyes. He doesn't need some grand adventure like Ikto. Asha just wants to understand the world they live in, even if it's just taking a glimpse at the capital. Is that too much to ask? Well, a deal's a deal. Wirral is the first to cave. They did promise Asha he could go if he won against them. Plus, he believes experience is the best teacher, and seeing things for himself matters too. Ikto adds that Asha has shown them that he can protect himself. Still, he reminds the prince that danger is still everywhere, so he makes Asha promise that he won't take risks. Of course, our protagonist is quick to promise that. Now it's only Helkov. With a sigh, the Beastkin says the prince can't live his whole life without avoiding danger, especially now with Asha's situation, so it's better to get used to it. Of course, Helkov will be right there with him. Asha instantly beamed, but Helkov has something else to say. Since he's at it, the clients he sells Asha's liquor to won't stop demanding more, and he can't exactly explain the situation to them by himself. With that said, it would do Helkov good if Asha could talk to them directly. Asha is more than happy to do so, while Saphira, who has been quiet all this time, finally speaks. She wants to see the lake, huh? Helkov didn't expect the talking sphere would come along too. Asha just instructed her not to speak outside, otherwise he can't explain it. Saphira agrees, reiterating to herself that voice communication outside is prohibited, her voice glowing brightly as she says so. It almost blinded Helkov and Ikto, so the Beastkin had to tell her to lower the brightness. They're also curious if Saphira is excited, but the latter defines excitement as an emotional state, obviously something she can't understand. While they were busy chattering about, Asha was already looking forward to seeing the imperial capital with his own eyes. His first time in the outside world. Asha can't believe his eyes, he's really seeing the capital for the first time. And look how big it is. He turns to Helkov only to see that the latter has his hand over his head, looking distressed. He can't believe they actually made it out of the palace. Well, it's not that surprising actually, given they took a less guarded gate. Still, Asha thinks it's pretty fortunate for them that they didn't get caught. The palace is supposed to be hard to breach with magic though, so what does this say about their security, huh? But if he really thought about it, Asha thinks that maybe it's because even if the light was made with magic, the phenomenon itself wasn't magic. It's like a system that flags harmful spells or detects certain dangerous ones. Before he could go on about this, Helkov had to stop his highness lest his head explode with all these pieces of information he can't process. Anyway, this is Asha's first time seeing the capital, and it was many times bigger than he imagined. But they can't go far today, and if they want to keep exploring, they must not get caught. From inside his cloak, Saphira says there are no critical concerns. But Asha knows he needs to exercise more care and not to get overconfident about this. Earlier, if the gate guards were beastkin, then this ploy of theirs may not have worked. From what he heard, dragonkin can sense what's invisible. So maybe they've got something like a snake's pit organ. It's a heat-sensing pit organ that can detect its prey by heat. If this were true, then all the techniques Asha used on his aides would be useless among the dragonkin. But he had no time to think about time because Helkov called the young prince over to show him the view. Whoa, they're looking at the vast calmness of the lake. Asha says he always knew it was wide when they were on higher ground, but even he can't see the shore from here. Helkov says back at home they never had a lake this huge when suddenly he hears Saphira say that the scan is complete. What the? This startled the beastkin, but Saphira continued on, saying no one is paying attention to Asha's suspicious behavior, so they should continue keeping a low profile. Hold on, did Saphira's voice also pop into Helkov's head? Asha explains that when he made improvements to Saphira's functions, he also amped its telepathy, so now it can handle two-way telepathy. While saying so, Saphira just told them that there are no dangers nearby. Helkov is responsible for guard duty, but it never hurts to have an extra lookout. Saphira gets fired up with this delegation, which didn't go unnoticed by Asha's perceptive eyes. Helkov and Asha spent some time admiring the view in silence until the latter asked if the area with the boats yonder was the commercial district. Helkov says it is, adding that they ship goods along the river. The prince then turns his attention to the lamps. With that much light, isn't lamp oil expensive? From what Helkov knows, commoners use cheap, low-quality oil, so those lights are probably small thunder lamps. These lamps are old devices sometimes found in old houses where they feed mana to light up the lamps. Additionally, the beastkin says the lamps are pretty rare and handy, so they fetch a high price. The design is crude and the mechanism is obscure, so no one can repair them. Heck, the palace doesn't have any of those. After hearing what Helkov had to say about the lamps and observing that the lamps' lights have a steady output and are not reddish, Asha deduced that those small thunder lamps may be alchemical tools. Helkov can't believe it. Are those things really alchemical tools too? Asha thinks so. They're probably electricity, saying he'll show Helkov how it's done with an experiment tomorrow. Anyway, the lamps are still useful, but have the people really forgotten how to make them? Saphira adds her 2 cents, saying maybe after the initial adoption, the demand for it ran out. Given how the lamps are pretty tough and rarely break, it's not surprising that they're still operational today. The prince thinks that maybe the knowledge to make these was abandoned before they needed to be replaced. Anyway, it's only the big cities that still use small thunder lamps, so the prince hopes he can examine a real one someday to see how they work. Just then, Saphira tells them that she's done scanning the lake and tells them that she detects an anomaly in the waves. The prince didn't even know she was scanning the lake, but Helkov eyes the surface of the water, prompting Asha to ask if he sees it. Unfortunately, Helkov can't see much in this darkness until a moment later, he sees it. He pushes Asha behind him, instructing the prince to step back since it's a monster. Helkov draws his weapons just in time to hear a fisherman's boat telling them that a monster is headed their way. Yeah, you don't say? Helkov's pretty pissed off because what kind of hunter just drives a monster their way? Suddenly there was a loud splash as something jumped out of the water. It was a marlin. Everything happened so quickly after. One moment, the prince locked eyes with the giant fish, but the next, Helkov took it down with one strike. The marlin flops before them, with Asha in awe. How did Helkov take it down with one strike? The latter grins proudly, saying their people hunt and eat fish-type monsters, so this is breakfast-tier stuff. Compared to this, spawning season salmon are way nastier. Asha's eyes beam upon imagining bears hunting salmon. A moment later, the fisherman approached them, apologizing, but before they could put in a word, Helkov was already glaring at them. Asha had to talk to him, saying they just saw how Helkov is, so there's no reason he should be so hard on the fisherfolk. Ugh, how can Helkov say no when the prince looks that cute? So yeah, he caved in and decided to let this one slide, much to the fisherfolk's relief. They took the marlin and apologized again before they left, and it was quite understandable what happened, given how it was their first job out alone as a junior team. After several mistakes, they ended up driving the marlin toward Helkov and Asha. The prince and his aide make their way around the alleyway of the capital, talking about how leaving home so young to do dangerous work is pretty rough. But his aide points out that Asha is much younger, yet he's much tougher. Plus, hunter work isn't all danger, you know. Helkov says many guilds give rookies delivery and gathering for experience. Hearing him talk about this so much made Asha ask if Helkov was a hunter like Ikto. But no, he's not. Monster extermination assignments get their intel from hunters, which is why Helkov keeps in touch with them to make things easier. This time, Asha asks if the army fights monsters often. Helkov replies that it's mostly training, but sometimes there are some minor border skirmishes against humans. Minor, huh? Do those really stay minor? To that, the aide answers that as soon as the Empire steps in to mediate, everyone calms down. But if the Empire felt like it, one command would be enough to mark every neighbor as an enemy. This day, Asha learned that the Empire's might is the deterrent that keeps this world in balance. If he, the enemy to half the court, became emperor, he'd trip on domestic issues first, and their neighbors would walk all over him. Yeah, peace can't hinge on him alone. Just then, Helkov points to a carriage nearby, saying they could take that to reach their destination. Soon after, they reach a place where a few townspeople can be seen walking the streets. Helkov and Asha reach their destination, and as soon as the former opens the door, he calls out to Molly, asking if this person is around. They're only met with silence. Maybe they're in the back. Asha's eyes were wandering, looking all over the place. Are these all alcohol? He spots boxes on the other corner, but before he can run over there, Helkov tells him not to wander off. Suddenly, they hear someone yell, "Helly!" and instantly hug Helkov, bawling their eyes out and telling him to make more beer. What the? Helkov is under attack. Wait, no, she's clinging and crying? Asha is so taken aback by this figure whose sudden appearance rattled him. This person has fangs and sharp claws, not to mention the scales on her skin. Does she have dragonkin blood? The girl continues to cling to Helkov, begging him to sell her more alcohol while Helkov tries his best to pry her hands off him. Is this her idea of being friendly? Anyway, Asha thinks he needs to free Helkov first, so he steps in and greets her. Suddenly, the girl makes a 180-degree change in attitude, beaming and calling Asha kiddo. Wait a minute, is he? Before she could get the question out, Helkov cut her off, saying that if his own father heard rumors about Helkov having a secret child, he'd kill him. So, yeah, this kid. Helkov racks his brains trying to figure out how to introduce Asha, when the latter goes ahead and tells the dragonkin girl that his name is Dinker. Helkov had to chortle, doing his best to stop himself from laughing because in their language, Denka means prince, so Asha just made it slang. Well, the girl couldn't care less. She tells him that her name is Moriam, but he can just call her Molly. She also tells the prince that she has dragonkin and seafolk blood in her, and that she and Helly are friends. Drinking buddies, to be precise. Molly turns to Helkov because she won't be swayed even if he brings a cute kid along with him. She's dead set on making him say yes to her demands today, even if Helkov tells her that he's not here for that. At least Molly should hear their side first. This is stressing him out, man. So in the end, Dinker decides to step in, saying he'll take it from here. Molly asks Dinker if he's going to get a bottle for his dad as a gift, which he says he plans to do for another time. For starters, he apologizes for cutting short her reunion with Helkov, asking if he could have a bit of Molly's time. With his effortless poise and oozing nobility, Molly eyes him suspiciously. Without batting an eyelash, she asks Helkov just whose little lord he dragged into her shop. To that, Helkov answers that Dinker came on his own. Meanwhile, our little lord is in a panic because Molly could already discern that he's royalty. Well, duh. It's because the little master's speech and manners don't match common kids his age. Crap, Asha can't help it, his only friend is a princess, okay? Before he could slip up, he decided to make the most of it and handed Molly a piece of paper. Molly takes it and scans the content, and the more she does, the more her brows start to furrow. Before long, her hands start shaking as Asha tells her that it's an improved recipe for the liquor she's currently reselling. Finally, he admits that he's the one who brewed it. Okay, that revelation fell short because there was no aha moment, just a confused Molly. Helkov had to call her out not to space out until she finally snapped back to reality. There's no way Dinker is the one behind this. He's just a child. To that, our protagonist explains that he started brewing to raise money, but since he can't judge the taste, he asked Helkov for help. Molly questions why a kid like him needs money anyway, so this time it's Helkov who answers. He tells his friend that Dinker has a little family situation going on. His father remarried and had a son on that side, and with the kid's mother gone, the new wife holds the power. Oh no, Molly feels for him. So does that mean Dinker is saving up because he thinks he'll be cast one day? That's just too cruel. There was a pregnant pause, with Asha wondering if Molly was actually sympathizing with him. But this is his chance. Dinker used this moment to present his proposal to her. Frankly speaking, he needs funds, but he can't brew at home any more than he already does. Plus, Molly did tell him earlier that she can sell 100 times more, correct? Since she's already a liquor supplier, this only means that she's got the capital to scale 100. As for him, he has ideas and he could also use her hunger to sell. Molly continues to listen intently, while Dinker continues that all he needs to make is a room and equipment. Following these factors, he suggests Molly scale up the equipment and build a production line. From there, they can increase the output as much as she wants while he's paid for the ideas. How about it? It doesn't sound like a bad deal, right? Molly counters that it's only a good deal if it succeeds. First of all, upsizing gear that yields liquor that is pure means building something that doesn't exist, so they have to start from scratch. Does he have any idea how much money and time that takes? That was a rhetorical question, by the way. Molly tells him that if he can do all that in a year, only then will she admit that his plan has real legs. But then again, Dragonskin folk hate losing, so that's too bad for him. Sure, Dinker's liquor is hot now, but she's not going to burn cash over a cheap provocation. Besides, mass production in a year is way too late. And since she's at it, Molly also points out that the equipment doesn't exist. They'd have to start from scratch by finding artisans and then test whether it even runs right. With all that said, a year is nowhere near enough. Dinker agrees to everything she said, and there's also the fact that they need people and a site. Molly would have to do all that by herself if she chooses to move forward with this proposal. Most importantly, if this fails, then the one holding the debt would also be Molly, right? The prince understands the challenges this project entails, but if her passion for liquor is real, then it isn't a bad bet. Now that she said her part, Molly has an inkling that Dinker's method is probably small scale, so hiring more hands to copy it is more realistic. So why doesn't he just do that? Is he afraid that the profits won't scale as much? Our protagonist admits that's partly a reason, leaving Molly a little impressed. At least he's honest and can do cost-benefit analysis. So, is there another reason why? To that, Dinker says it's to protect her image. Now it got Molly confused again, turning to Helkov for answers, but her friend just warned her that she might hate this part. Finally, our protagonist tells her that the liquor he brewed is actually made of alchemy. EH. Suddenly Molly clamps her hand over her mouth. What the hell? Alchemy as in that alchemy? Isn't that just a scam and low-grade junk? Crap, is it poison? And she drank a lot of it too. Asha finds it amazing how those are the first things she thought of when he mentioned alchemy. So to help ease her a little, Helkov says alchemy has medicinal wines. But she's not buying it. Molly is even close to doubling over and hurling, thinking that the things she consumed were those stinky bitter kinds that are stuffed with herbs. Wait a minute. She looks at the recipe Dinker gave her earlier. Seeing her reaction, Dinker used the chance to explain that this one is different. They purify the alcohol with alchemy, then refine the aroma and flavor. Molly turns to Helkov for help, asking him just what the hell he put the kid up to. The latter replies that this is just Dinker being himself. It's also the reason why the kid learned so young that he can't lean on adults. Back to Dinker, he tells Molly that if they establish it as a new technique, the stigma around alchemy won't matter since it will become a business recipe. Speaking of recipes, he already has better recipes, and they can turn those into their brand. They can just say that the ones they're selling right now are just test runs for the market. Asha believes that if mass production is impossible now, they can reset and start over. The only question is whether Molly's shop has the stamina to do it. Of course, he doesn't expect an instant answer from her, so he puts his hood back on, saying they should head back soon since they only slipped out. As for the recipe, Dinker tells her to keep it as a token of good faith. Terrifying. That's the first thing Molly can say about this kid. From the looks of it, Dinker doesn't even look like he's 10. And that alone makes this even scarier. No one in their right mind casually leaves behind an improved version of their own product. She knows he's not just some kid she can patronize. Molly also knows he's got a lot of ideas, and this one recipe means nothing to him. In fact, he's got even bigger and grander designs, several of them. Dinker admits that she's correct. He can develop a whole unique brand of liquor for her by using rare materials and luxury goods. Molly checks the recipe again, thinking that the key is this alchemically produced alcohol, right? Whoever mass produces it first will own the riches. And if she doesn't secure this now, someone else will buy this kid's ideas and make it big. Okay? Well, since Dinker and Helkov have no idea when they can come again, the former encourages her to sit on it for a bit before deciding when she suddenly tells them that she's in. With a flushed face and excitement oozing from her whole body, she tells them that she'll invest in Dinker's idea. She's in. Asha did not expect Molly's impulsivity to win over, but he could only thank her for that, leaving him and Helkov a little dumbfounded by her snap decision. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 9.2. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.